Lightning illuminates a tense confrontation between the kneeling black-haired man and the blonde woman.
The black-haired man lowers his gaze while offering a sincere apology for his actions.
Looking at her reflection, the blonde woman questions the actual reason behind his sudden apology.
A gloved hand clenches with suppressed emotion, highlighting the rising tension within the room.
The blonde woman stares intently, asking him if he recalls the words he once spoke.
Narrative text over dark roses reflects on the difficulty of understanding another's true suffering.
She touches the window, noting his desire for her to suffer and the irony of her amnesia.
Looking visibly shaken and distressed, the black-haired man weakly denies her accusations of malice.
Back turned to him, the blonde woman reflects on her past state of oblivious, helpless love. She suggests that his actions prevented their marriage this time, leaving the man in stunned silence. A sudden flash of lightning silhouettes the woman, emphasizing the dramatic weight of her words. The black-haired man remains still, the view focusing on the silent burden he now carries. She speaks with a calm finality, asking if he knows her greatest source of regret. With a tearful, bittersweet smile, she confesses her deep regret for ever having loved him.
Concern ripples through a crowd as they find Rowena collapsed and unconscious on the floor. Rowena wakes up to the worried faces of her parents, who call out her name.
Her mother expresses intense relief and worry while Rowena questions her current surroundings and state. Her father details the terror her sudden disappearance caused and asks where she had gone. Rowena struggles with her memory as her mother questions if she feels well enough to speak. Kneeling alone, Rowena clutches flowers and appears haunted by a memory she cannot quite grasp.
A man reflects on the hollow feeling of having lost something immensely precious to him. Narrations reveal that the heiress Rowena Blooming was recovered from a hunting ground outbuilding after vanishing. Life continues at a bustling social gathering, contrasting the quiet mystery surrounding Rowena's recent recovery.
Sarah the maid finds Rowena in the garden, expressing relief that her lady has not vanished.
Sarah reminds Rowena of her past disappearance and the constant exhaustion that followed her return.
The maid scolds her for causing such worry, but Rowena simply laughs off the concern.
Rowena privately acknowledges that Sarah's fears for her safety are entirely justified given her history.
A floral frame surrounds the confession that Rowena has experienced strange dreams since her return.
She visualizes a dark-haired man from her dreams where they are engaged in passionate intimacy.
Overwhelmed by her confusing and vivid dreams, Rowena screams in frustration during her evening walk. Despite the intensity of the dreams, Rowena admits she forgets the details soon after waking.
The secluded outbuilding stands silent among the trees, holding the secrets of the night she vanished.
Rowena sees a dark figure behind her, but Sarah appears confused by her lady's sudden alarm. Sarah asks what is wrong, while Rowena rubs her eyes as the shadow seemingly vanishes.
Rowena tries to convince herself and Sarah that her vision was just a trick of light.
Sarah bids Rowena a peaceful night as the lady prepares to sleep in her quiet room.
As Rowena settles into bed, a shadowy figure looms over her and whispers her name. A blood-curdling scream echoes through the mansion, signaling Rowena's sudden and absolute terror.
Sarah rushes into the room in a panic, while a terrified Rowena points to an intruder.
Rowena insists someone is in the room, but Sarah is baffled by the invisible threat. Realizing that Sarah sees nothing, Rowena shivers with the horrifying knowledge that only she can see.
Rowena points desperately at the shadowy man, yet Sarah questions if her lady is simply mistaken.
Huddled in fear, Rowena questions if she is losing her mind or seeing something truly supernatural.
Rowena flinches at the sight, her face pale as the unseen presence continues to haunt her.
To calm Sarah, Rowena lies and claims her eyes played a trick on her after all.
Rowena forces a smile and dismisses her maid, though the room remains heavy with unseen dread.
Rowena freezes as the dark entity calls her name again immediately after the maid exits.
Clutching her heart in bed, she is forced to accept that the phantom is still present.
The shadowy man stands silently by the window, leading Rowena to fear a wraith followed her.
Night falls over the rustling forests, where the wind carries an eerie, murmuring sound through the trees.
Servants search the dark hunting grounds at night, murmuring about the lady's mysterious disappearance.
A pair of bare feet dangle precariously from a high stone ledge above the searchers.
The men point upward in shock as they finally spot the lady perched high above. Sitting silently on the ledge, Rowena stares blankly as the searchers finally find her. The mysterious silence of night surrounds her as she sits motionless on the high ledge. Rowena awakens with a start, her eyes filled with the lingering dread of her dreams. Sarah tells Rowena to wake up and get ready as breakfast will be ready soon. Sarah brushes Rowena's hair as she sits quietly in her opulent bedroom. Rowena's eyes shift nervously as she senses an unwelcome presence lurking just out of sight. A dark shadow appears in her reflection, confirming Rowena's fear that she is being watched.
Rowena freezes as she identifies the translucent phantom of a man standing inside her room.
Sarah continues her morning chores, walking right past the phantom without noticing its terrifying presence.
Rowena dines with her parents in the grand hall beneath a massive glowing chandelier.
Trembling as she holds her tea, Rowena desperately wonders how to handle her spectral stalker.
The phantom looms directly behind Rowena's chair, casting a chilling aura over the family meal. The phantom mutters a curse, causing Rowena to sweat as she realizes it can speak.
Rowena is startled as her name is called, breaking the phantom's terrifying hold on her.
Eileen Blooming, Duchess of the estate, notes her daughter looks unwell and asks what's wrong.
Rowena forces a cheerful smile and lies, claiming she was simply lost in her thoughts.
Rowena realizes that no one else can see the strange phantom that is haunting her.
Her parents watch with concern, unsettled by Rowena's strange behavior since her recent return.
Rowena concludes there is no use telling them about the phantom they cannot hear.
Eileen asks Rowena when she plans to buy gifts for their upcoming visit to the orphanage.
Rowena agrees to head downtown tomorrow to take care of the necessary gift shopping.
Willard Blooming, patriarch of the estate, regrets missing the visit and asks if she'll be okay.
Rowena reassures her father while trying to ignore the mocking spirit leering at her side.
Rowena and Sarah walk up the grand staircase as a trail of light follows them.
Rowena glances back, feeling a brief sense of relief after seemingly losing her phantom follower.
On the high landing, she continues to wonder about the true nature of the phantom.
Rowena trips on the edge of a step, her foot catching as she loses her balance.
Sarah watches in absolute horror as Rowena tumbles backward down the steep grand staircase. A terrified scream escapes Sarah as she witnesses her lady's violent fall down the stairs.
Chaos erupts as Rowena plummets into the darkness, her life flashing before her eyes.
One of Rowena's shoes flies off, highlighting the force of her sudden and dangerous fall.
A gloved hand suddenly intercedes, catching Rowena mid-air before she can hit the ground.
Caught mid-fall, Rowena stares up in shock at the spectral man who saved her.
Her heart races as she looks directly into the eyes of her unexpected, ghostly savior.
The phantom man holds Rowena securely, his form becoming more solid and his face clear.
Holding her close, the phantom man asks Rowena if she can truly see him.
Rowena's foot lands safely on a step as the phantom's intervention ends her fall.
The ghostly figure vanishes into a sliver of light, leaving Rowena standing alone and shaken.
Rowena finds herself kneeling on the stairs, gasping for breath after the narrow escape.
Sarah rushes down to check on Rowena, stunned that she survived the fall unscathed.
Sarah asks if she is all right, while Rowena deflects her worry by joking about core strength.
Rowena asks Sarah to keep the accident a secret to avoid worrying her parents.
She requests a more sensible pair of shoes that will allow for safer movement tomorrow.
Sarah bids her lady a good rest and closes the heavy door behind her.
Alone in the silence, Rowena reflects on the phantom's haunting and intimate words.
Deep in thought, she considers the heavy burdens and expectations of her noble birth.
She recalls the strict lesson that a lady must remain calm and collected at all times.
Rowena clenches her dress, desperately trying to maintain her composure as a noble lady.
In her bedroom, Rowena asks the phantom man what message he intends to deliver. Rowena questions the ghostly figure about why he has been following her for days.
The phantom man sighs, dismissing her fear of him being a mere wraith.
He remains silent for a moment, his gaze shifting as he considers his next words.
Rowena looks up in surprise as the man's shadow looms directly behind her.
He asks for her assistance, while Rowena questions how she can trust an unknown entity.
The man expresses his own reluctance and frustration at having to ask for her help.
Angered by his arrogance, Rowena clenches her fist and challenges his rude attitude. Apparently, being from the future doesn't mean you've learned any manners.
He explains that he must rely on her because she is the only one present.
He points out that she owes him a great debt for saving her life earlier.
Rowena begrudgingly admits her gratitude for his intervention during her dangerous fall.
The phantom man clenches his fist as he prepares to disclose his true identity. He finally introduces himself as Enoch Claude, a name that leaves Rowena utterly stunned. Rowena realizes he belongs to the powerful and prestigious Margrave House of the Morth.
Enoch clarifies that he is not actually dead despite his ghostly and translucent appearance.
He reveals his true nature as a traveler who is not from this current time.
Enoch confesses he is from 4 years in the future and needs help returning.
He remains silent while Rowena processes the impossible fact of his arrival from the future.
Standing by the window, Enoch repeats his claim of originating from a future timeline.
He promises to reward her house handsomely if she agrees to help him return.
Rowena looks away, deeply unsettled by the mysterious man's incredible and life-altering claims.
An oppressive silence fills the room as the phantom man waits for her response.
Rowena observes him closely and concludes that he does not appear to be lying.
She asks for more details regarding the specific reward he promised to her family.
Enoch points and asserts that the repayment will benefit her entire noble household.
He pledges that his house will support hers whenever they are in need of assistance. Rowena is confused by the paradox of people existing in two different timelines simultaneously.
Rowena considers the paradox that the future Enoch and present Enoch are distinct entities.
She questions whether the time difference will make it impossible for him to keep promises.
Enoch approaches her, asking if she is aware of the rumors surrounding his family.
Enoch declares that House Claude is infamous for achieving its goals by any means.
A knock at the door interrupts them as Enoch reaffirms his promise of aid.
Sarah enters the room, but Rowena is preoccupied asking Enoch how he knows her name.
Enoch smirks and notes that Rowena is quite famous within high society circles.
The phantom man begins to dissolve into light, leaving Rowena standing alone and confused.
Rowena notes Enoch's sudden departure while Sarah enters to present her lady's new shoes.
A dark, intense presence lingers in the room even after the man has vanished.
Rowena's eye shifts nervously as she tries to comprehend the supernatural events she just witnessed.
She reflects on how the name Claude feels uncannily familiar for some unknown reason.
The name Claude brings to mind the image of a powerful and ambitious young nobleman.
Claude is identified as the youngest and most ambitious head of house in the empire.
He is known for his ruthless determination to achieve his goals at any cost. She recalls the rumors about the legendary handsome features and ruthless nature of Duke Claude.
She forces a nervous smile, trying to hide her internal panic from her maid.
Narrations reveal that Rowena ultimately agreed to help the mysterious man return home.
Rowena's efforts to find information in the library remain frustratingly unfruitful for many days.
Rowena acknowledges the immense difficulty of searching for a man only she can perceive.
Life continues as she has tea with her mother, her secret burden weighing heavily.
Rowena sips her tea in silence, feeling completely overwhelmed by her secret and impossible task.
Eileen asks her daughter if something is bothering her, causing a nervous Rowena to flinch and look away.
Eileen suggests the sun might have dazed her, while Rowena struggles to manage her internal panic. Eileen acknowledges that she and the patriarch have likely been bothering their daughter far too much.
Eileen observes that Rowena seems unsettled when around them, prompting the girl to offer a nervous response.
Eileen shrugs and laughs, asking for patience while noting they were startled by her recent disappearance.
Flashbacks depict Rowena's parents weeping while Eileen recalls how speechless they were when she vanished.
Rowena gazes down at her cup in silence, clearly moved by the depth of her parents' distress.
Rowena apologizes for causing worry, while Eileen pours tea and insists the incident wasn't her fault.
Eileen explains that Rowena's recent strange behavior reminds her of an incident involving the girl's grandmother.
Rowena asks for clarification, and Eileen confirms she is referring to a past event involving her mother.
Eileen explains that her own mother also vanished without a trace during her youth, shocking Rowena. Eileen clarifies that her mother's brief disappearance in the past once threw the entire household into chaos.
Eileen adds that her mother claimed to see a ghost, causing Enoch to react with visible surprise.
Eileen mentions how her mother repeatedly insisted ghosts exist, while Rowena tells Enoch he's in her way.
Eileen compares the two women, while Enoch signals Rowena to keep quiet to avoid further suspicion.
Rowena sighs as Eileen explains that her mother could never fully recall what happened at the time.
Eileen pauses to try and remember the specific name her mother used when referring to the ghost.
Rowena and Enoch look on expectantly as Eileen attempts to recall the spectral name from the past.
Eileen wonders if her mother still sees ghosts, while a flashback shows the grandmother with her husband.
Eileen clarifies that her mother only perceived the entities briefly in her youth and stopped thereafter.
Eileen recounts how the ghost claimed to be a guardian there to fend off her mother's misfortune.
Enoch ponders if the entity was a guardian spirit, while Rowena stares at him with intense curiosity.
Rowena taps the table while Eileen admits they'll never know if the ghost actually provided help. Eileen notes that her mother lived a joyful life once the phantom finally disappeared from her sight.
Eileen smiles while recalling her mother's cheerful personality as they continue their afternoon tea and snacks.
Eileen wonders what the specific misfortune was while taking another sip from her elegant porcelain teacup. Enoch turns his head away, appearing deep in thought as he considers the grandmother's historical accounts. Eileen speculates the spirit fended off a marriage proposal, causing Enoch to clench his gloved fist. Eileen shares a rumor that the woman who replaced her mother as countess met a tragic end.
Eileen adds that the replacement lady is dead, causing Rowena to flinch at the grim news.
Rowena reacts to the death with shock while Eileen and a maid discuss the tragedy in flashback.
Rowena stares ahead as she processes the news, realizing the potential danger inherent in her own situation.
Enoch remains grim and silent, his serious expression matching the dark implications of the mother's story.
A sudden surge of energy fills the air as the atmosphere becomes increasingly heavy and ominous. Rowena realizes that if her grandmother's experience is repeating, she may be facing imminent life-threatening misfortune.
A close-up of a wooden carriage wheel highlights the family's journey along a dusty dirt road.
Sitting inside the carriage, Rowena gazes out the window while her maid sits across from her.
Rowena looks down with a solemn expression, thinking about the names Pharma and Agnes from her history. Flashbacks show Viscount Farmer proposing to the grandmother after she split from the Count of Hanover.
Portraits show the grandmother and her kind husband who enjoyed many happy years together in their marriage.
Following her husband's death, the grandmother fulfills her wish to travel and see the entire continent.
Rowena stares intently at the carriage floor, lost in thought regarding her family's mysterious spectral legacy. Rowena asks her mother when the grandmother is expected to return home from her continental tour. Eileen admits she is uncertain of the schedule, but expects it to take a few more years.
Eileen laughs and asks if Rowena misses her, but Rowena is focused on the guardian spirit.
Rowena resolves to find her grandmother's journals while Enoch and the maid sit across from her. Rowena is startled out of her thoughts as her name is called by someone outside the carriage.
The maid gleefully informs Rowena that they will soon arrive at their destination on the market street.
A dark motion blur indicates that a figure is moving at extreme speed through the city streets.
A brown horse gallops through the market as the carriage finally reaches the busy shopping district.
The carriage driver shouts in alarm as he suddenly reins in the startled horses. A young boy in a brown cap darting across the street causes the horses to rear. The coachman yells at the kid to watch it and breathes a sigh of relief.
Sarah explains a boy ran in front of the carriage and asks if Rowena is all right.
Rowena watches the boy run away and, suspecting she might know who the child is, Rowena demands to go see the boy herself and steps out of the carriage.
Sarah urges Rowena to wait a moment while Enoch watches the scene with a frown.
A close-up of Enoch shows him reflecting on how Rowena's impulsive behavior is quite typical.
Rowena runs through the market as Enoch remarks she is always going to be a bother. Rowena pants heavily, struggling to maintain her speed while chasing the boy through the market.
Rowena identifies the child as Victor and desperately calls out his name.
Rowena dashes through the marketplace, yelling for the boy to wait for a moment. Rowena continues to scream Victor's name as she follows him through the busy shopping district. Rowena attempts to say she has something to tell him but suddenly trips and falls.
Enoch catches Rowena before she falls, saving her from hitting the hard cobblestone.
Enoch mocks Rowena, asking if she has made it a goal to be clumsy and trip.
Enoch tells Rowena to be careful while the blonde lady remains frozen in his grasp.
Enoch stares at the boy and remarks that Victor's current behavior seems quite suspicious.
Enoch asks Rowena why she thinks the young boy is running away from her.
Rowena looks away and admits that she is not entirely sure why Victor is fleeing.
Enoch notes Victor kept a hand in his pocket while running and calls it peculiar.
Rowena realizes Victor has stolen a piece of jewelry, reacting with shock at the crime.
Enoch confirms the boy has taken something from someone in the crowd, troubling Rowena deeply.
A flashback shows Victor happily taking care of his sick sister amidst blooming flowers. Enoch asserts that providing donations doesn't mean Rowena understands the difficult lives children lead.
Rowena argues she needs to speak with Victor while Sarah searches the market for her.
Enoch tells her that is enough when Rowena suggests she might be able to help.
Enoch reflects that people risk everything for survival, doing things they never imagined they would.
Enoch asks if Rowena believes everything in the world can be solved with favors.
Rowena looks down and confesses that she could be considered a hypocrite for her outlook.
Despite her self-doubt, Rowena insists that she still wants to help the child in need. Rowena recalls Victor as a joyous child and refuses to imagine him in grave danger.
Enoch simply asks if that is truly the case as he looks at a door.
Enoch explains that street pickpockets are normally part of an organized and dangerous group.
Rowena asks if Victor is involved with a gang while men watch him nearby.
Enoch confirms they are likely small-time back alley groups that still pose a threat to orphans. Rowena remembers Victor's sister has a rare disease, likely forcing him into a desperate life.
Rowena explains her estate covered the sister's medical expenses, but the treatment proved ineffective.
Enoch gazes at Rowena with a sharp expression as she discusses the boy's tragic situation. Finding a safe place for the boy seems increasingly like a hopeless and distant dream.
A helpless boy sits alone while an inferno consumes the room around him.
The fire intensifies as the desire for something deeply is said to create desperation.
The boy's desperation reaches a point beyond any measure as flames surround him.
Sarah pants and tells her lady that she has been looking for her everywhere.
Sarah urges Rowena to hurry for her gift store appointment, and the lady agrees.
A dark presence looms behind her, offering to assist in the search for the boy.
Enoch reveals himself and asks if Rowena needs his help finding the child she seeks. Enoch claims he is well acquainted with such children, while Rowena stares in surprise.
Enoch considers that he should probably not mention that he has utilized such children himself.
Rowena pauses to look back at the market before continuing on with her maid.
Enoch ponders how his next move will surely provoke a significant reaction from the lady.
Walking through the market, Enoch asks Rowena what her specific conditions for their agreement will be.
Enoch clarifies that he wants Rowena to read him the journals belonging to her late grandmother.
Rowena is confused by the simple request, but the spectral man insists that is his price.
Enoch begins to explain his current limitations as a spirit while standing before a fruit stall. He demonstrates his intangible nature by showing that his hand passes directly through a loaf of bread.
Enoch explains that while he can touch her during emergencies, he is otherwise unable to interact physically.
Rowena questions if Enoch can ever behave with the dignity expected of a grown man.
The scene shifts to a grand, multi-story building standing tall under the bright afternoon sun. A servant calls out to her lady as someone steps firmly onto the grass outside the building.
Rowena wears a suit and mustache disguise, while Sarah and Sir Lorson question the extreme measures.
Disguised Rowena waves off their concerns, reminding them that they have the protection of Sir Lawson.
Enoch watches silently as someone speaks of the heavens blessing them with divine love and care.
Enoch mockingly repeats the words about heavenly love while watching a knight provide for the poor.
Enoch smirks at the idea of divine care, suggesting the heavens haven't been kind to them.
A vision shows house blooming engulfed in flames, a tragedy destined to happen in 4 years.
Spectral blue light drifts through a dimly lit room where a single torch burns on the wall.
Disguised Rowena confirms with Sir Lawson that they have arrived at the location specified by their contact. Entering a tavern, Sir Lawson notes that the men inside would betray their own families for gold.
The rough men mock Rowena's delicate appearance and ask if she is searching for a child.
Sir Lawson bristles at their insults while the disguised Rowena steps forward to lead the confrontation.
Ignoring their taunts, the disguised lady demands to know if the boy is actually on the premises.
The ringleader demands 30 gold pieces for the boy, which Rowena realizes is an outrageous overcharge.
Enoch leans in and whispers for Rowena to counter the offer with only 10 gold pieces.
Rowena worries the offer is too low, but Enoch remains confident in his strategy for the negotiation.
Enoch explains that these desperate men will accept any amount of gold if pushed correctly. Enoch warns her not to show weakness, as these men will easily take advantage of her.
Enoch urges Rowena to remain firm and not hesitate during this high-stakes exchange with the criminals.
Placing a spectral hand on her shoulder, Enoch tells Rowena to follow his instructions to protect Victor.
Enoch asks if she is capable of following through, and the disguised lady gives a determined nod.
Stepping forward with newfound resolve, Rowena firmly offers the men 10 gold pieces for the child.
The ringleader scoffs at the low offer, accusing Rowena of not being serious about the transaction.
Disguised Rowena stands her ground, coldly stating that she did not come there to negotiate with them.
She escalates the situation by threatening to have the men imprisoned immediately if they do not comply.
Rowena claims she is giving them a final chance, leaving the criminals visibly confused and rattled.
The rough men fall silent, wondering what kind of authority this delicate-looking stranger truly possesses.
Rowena reveals her knowledge of their bribe to the town guard, further unnerving the criminal group.
She claims to have significantly more influence with the guard than they do, silencing the ringleader. Challenging them to resist, she warns they will lose all their protections if they cross her.
Frustrated and intimidated, the ringleader finally relents and orders his men to bring the captives in.
Heavy footsteps echo through the room as the children are led toward the center of the tavern.
2 men bring out the young Victor, who looks exhausted and fearful as he faces Rowena's group.
Disguised Rowena smiles warmly at the sight of the boy, relieved to have finally found him.
Her expression shifts to sudden shock as she realizes something is wrong with the current situation. Victor sits alone on the floor, prompting Rowena to wonder why his sister isn't with him. Rowena looks around the dark room and demands to know the location of the other child.
The ringleader smirks cruelly and asks if she is referring to the young girl in their custody.
He claims the girl is too valuable for the initial price, causing the miserable Victor to weep. The criminal increases his demand to 50 gold pieces for the return of both children as a pair. He suggests this new price would ensure a smooth agreement, while Lawson and Sarah watch in disgust.
Disguised Rowena reacts with visible shock, questioning the ringleader's outrageous demand for 50 gold pieces.
The criminal looks toward the disguised lady and questions what that sum of gold means to her.
Rowena grows increasingly agitated by the negotiation, while the tavern atmosphere becomes heavy with tension.
Enoch appears behind Rowena and advises her to maintain a calm and composed demeanor.
The spectral man warns Rowena not to let her intense emotions cloud her judgment during the exchange.
Rowena demands the other child be brought out before she agrees to any further bargaining.
The ringleader waves his hand and complies with the request to bring the girl forward.
A man leads a young girl into the room as she looks around with fear and exhaustion.
The criminal ringleader boastfully claims the captives are of the highest quality to the disgusted lady.
Rowena freezes in shock and outrage after hearing the man refer to the children as mere products.
Rowena strides forward with purpose while Enoch desperately urges her to wait for a moment.
A gloved fist slams violently against the wooden table, punctuating Rowena's growing fury with a loud crash.
Disguised Rowena asks if she still looks delicate to the men now that she has taken action.
Steam rises from the cracked wood as Rowena challenges the men for judging her only by appearances.
Rowena stares coldly at the criminal and asserts that she always finishes whatever she decides to start.
Rowena pressures the ringleader by revealing her knowledge regarding the bribes he pays to the town guard.
She continues her verbal assault, suggesting her sources of information are far deeper than he ever imagined.
Rowena asks if her threat is effective enough while Enoch watches her performance from the background. The ringleader breaks into a cold sweat, clearly intimidated by the authority of the stranger is displaying.
Defeated and fearful of the consequences, the ringleader finally relents and agrees to the deal.
A carriage wheel rolls through the market as the group finally departs the dangerous tavern area.
The carriage travels through the busy town district as the sun begins to set over the buildings.
One of the children expresses a deep fear of being returned to the orphanage during their escape. Now without her disguise, Rowena kneels before the children and gently asks why they feel that way. The young boy turns his head away in silence, looking down at the ground with great sorrow.
Sir Lawson interrupts the quiet moment to address Rowena, catching her attention away from the children.
The knight politely asks if he may speak with the lady privately for a short while.
Rowena expresses her sincere gratitude to Sir Lawson for his bravery and assistance throughout the day.
Sir Lawson looks at Rowena with a serious expression and mentions he has something to tell her.
The knight offers to house the children at his residence while the current situation is being resolved. Rowena is visibly taken aback by the unexpected offer and asks if he truly means his home.
Sir Lawson explains his mother lives alone and would likely appreciate the lively company of the children.
He asserts his desire to keep them protected while Rowena wonders if she has already burdened him.
Enoch remains silent in the background, watching the knight with a suspicious and focused gaze.
The group walks together through the town square, heading toward a more secure and safe location.
Sir Lawson speaks kindly to the orphans as Rowena watches them interact with a hopeful smile.
The children look up with bright and sparkling eyes, feeling a sense of relief and new hope. Rowena waves from her carriage window, thanking the knight and children as they part ways. Sir Lawson and the children stand together in the street, watching as the carriage rolls away.
Leaning against the window, Rowena smiles happily, satisfied that the children are finally out of danger.
Delicate pink blossoms frame the shifting scene as the evening transition settles over the grand estate. Back at the mansion, Sarah encourages her lady to get some well-deserved rest after the ordeal.
The ornate bedroom door clicks shut as Sarah leaves Rowena alone to reflect on the day.
Rowena sits on her bed in a comfortable gown, glancing toward the empty space in the room.
Rowena considers the events of the afternoon and wonders if she should thank Enoch for helping.
Rowena begins to address the spectral man with a hesitant smile, preparing to express her gratitude.
A close-up of Rowena's eye shows her sudden realization that something about Enoch's form has changed.
A brief pause in the narrative marks a transition between the day's events and the evening.
Rowena wonders if the spirit has become more visible or if her senses are simply playing tricks.
Rowena remarks on Claude's sharp eyes, catching the spectral man off guard with her sudden and direct observation.
Rowena pivots to thanking him for earlier, though Claude notes that her gratitude is quite delayed.
Rowena reacts with a surprised expression as she processes his blunt comment regarding the timing of her thanks.
Rowena wonders if his standoffish demeanor is due to her failure to thank him first for today's help.
Claude prepares to address a more serious matter, his expression remaining stern as he looks toward the lady.
Claude demands the reasoning behind Rowena's reckless and emotional behavior during their earlier confrontation at the tavern.
Rowena clenches her dress as she searches for the right words to explain her sudden outburst of emotion.
Rowena admits that witnessing the children being treated as mere products caused her to lose her self-control entirely.
Claude stares at her silently, reflecting on Rowena's admission that she used a bluff to end the negotiation.
Claude marches across the room with heavy steps, startling Rowena as she watches him approach with a frown.
Claude towers over Rowena and sternly warns her never to let her emotions get the best of her again.
Rowena stands up and firmly tells Claude that she never agreed to be lectured or ordered around by him.
Rowena coldly reminds him that they are not close enough to discuss such personal matters in the first place.
Rowena stares back at Claude with a defiant and resolute expression following her sharp rejection of his lecture.
Rowena questions if they truly aren't close enough, her expression showing a mix of defiance and deep thought.
Claude acknowledges that they are indeed not close, though he suggests that this state of affairs is temporary.
Looking at Rowena, Claude recalls a tragic future prophecy where she and her family are destined for eventual ruin. A glowing vision speaks of love blooming unexpectedly, transitioning the scene into a sparkly, dreamlike atmosphere. The vision reveals a grand estate garden where deep feelings for Rowena began to take root and grow.
A couple walks through the lush grounds, their warmth and expressions fueling a love that refuses to wither.
The memory focuses on Rowena's face as the narrator speaks of the deep feelings she holds in her heart. A glowing message from Rowena confirms that she would have loved Enoch regardless of his identity or fate.
The vision distorts into static as Rowena and the man stand together in a grand, ornate palace corridor. Rowena is depicted in an elegant pink gown, looking serene and happy within the unfolding memory or vision.
A dark screen displays a final, chilling premonition stating that Rowena will die right in front of the man.
In the vision, Rowena joyfully reaches out her hand and asks the man for a dance during a ball.
Other noble women whisper behind their fans as they witness Rowena's bold and direct interaction with the mysterious man.
The man from the memory glances back with a neutral expression, concealing his true thoughts and dark intentions. He considers Rowena either outrageous or fearless for speaking to him in the presence of the crown princess.
He accepts the invitation, claiming it would be an honor to share a dance with the highborn lady.
A slight grin appears on his face as he resolves not to miss this perfect opportunity to proceed. As they dance, he reflects on his cruel plan to make Rowena a scapegoat for her father's downfall.
He plots to orchestrate the demise of her family while holding her close in a deceptive and calculating embrace.
He mocks her naive smile, relishing her total lack of knowledge regarding the tragedy he has carefully planned.
Rowena confesses that her heart is racing with nervousness while they continue their graceful dance across the ballroom.
He finds her confession unpleasant, but decides he can endure it to ensure the total success of his scheme.
A close-up of his calculating eye highlights his determination to exploit her vulnerability for his own advantage.
He believes there is no weakness greater than a man's children and intends to use that leverage cruelly. In a dark fantasy, he imagines twisting her neck and throwing her body at her father's feet in victory.
He decides a slow and steady betrayal is far more effective for bringing about her family's eventual demise.
He resolves to use her genuine feelings for him as a weapon to gain a total lethal advantage. A spiky bubble emphasizes his cold and heartless determination to use her feelings to achieve his ultimate goals.
Returning to the present, Claude's spectral form suddenly vanishes in a swirl of light, leaving Rowena alone.
Rowena gazes at the empty space where Claude stood, her expression thoughtful as she softly speaks his name.
Rowena checks if Claude is upset, prompting the spectral man to turn around with a startled, defensive reaction.
Claude insists he isn't upset, noting they are simply partners cooperating under a firm and mutual agreement.
Rowena points out that his serious gaze tells a different story, regardless of his claims to be fine.
Claude brushes her observation aside and states they must visit Viscount Pharma's estate to continue their work. Rowena asks about the timing, and Claude explains he wants to wait until Victor's safety is fully secured. Rowena firmly declares the children are her responsibility, and realizes Claude is becoming more clearly visible and tangible.
Enoch reflects on his past behavior, noticing he was once more mature than he is now.
Claude asks if she is too relaxed. Rowena dismisses his rush, claiming she is simply tired.
Claude looks on in silence, his face unreadable as he observes Rowena's casual dismissal of him.
Narration confirms Enoch Claude will do anything within his reach to achieve his ultimate goals.
Claude views Rowena as a mere tool while a happy memory of them dancing together flashes by. Claude stands alone in the room as a transition marks a change in his internal thoughts.
A moment of internal frustration occurs as Claude wonders why he finds himself feeling so annoyed.
Rowena reaches for a book in the library while Claude watches her from a distance.
Claude contemplates his current state, realizing he is nothing more than a ghost to her right now.
He recalls her past claims of love at first sight and wonders if it was all an act.
A week passes, and Claude asks when Rowena plans on visiting the Viscount Pharma estate.
Rowena explains her uncle's difficulty in inviting her immediately due to a recent guest's presence.
Claude suggests an unofficial visit. Rowena counters his impatience by addressing him formally as Lord Claude.
Rowena acknowledges his past perspective but firmly states that the current situation is her present reality. As the blooming dukedom's heir, Rowena prioritizes assisting her father with the many tasks at hand.
Rowena demands respect for her schedule. Claude questions why she's being so earnest about her duties.
A close-up of Rowena's eye captures a fleeting moment of intense focus or realization.
Rowena observes that Claude has become even more bitter recently as they continue their interaction. She wonders if his increased visibility makes it easier for her to read his negative expressions.
Rowena warns him that if he continues pestering her tomorrow, there will be consequences. Claude counters, suggesting that her desire to stall the schedule might have a hidden motive.
Claude boldly suggests that Rowena is dragging things out because she is developing feelings for him.
Rowena reacts with a visible shiver and a confused look at his sudden and arrogant accusation. Rowena expresses total shock at his claim and demands to know what is wrong with him.
Claude narcissistically cites rumors of his handsomeness. Rowena thinks no sane person would say that. Claude insists her stalling is just to be with him. Rowena dismisses his claims with a squint. An abstract transition marks a shift in the conversation as the two remain at odds.
Rowena calls him a fuzzy spirit and rejects the idea of having feelings for a mere specter.
She loudly declares she has no interest in cranky, time-traveling spirits from the future.
Claude is left stunned and speechless by Rowena's blunt and vocal rejection of his presence.
Claude reflects that the more he gets to know her, the more complex she becomes.
He realizes she is distancing herself from the version of Rowena blooming he once knew.
Rowena repeats her lack of interest in specters as she walks away from the surprised man.
Claude looks taken aback. Rowena assures him she has no plans to keep him around forever.
Rowena promises to return him to his proper place. Claude contemplates her vow with a serious gaze.
Claude reflects on her promise, concluding that her plan to eventually part ways doesn't sit right.
The scene transitions to a grand view of the dukedom's ornate palace under a bright sky.
Rowena bids her mother farewell as she prepares to depart the estate in a large carriage.
The red carriage begins its journey, rolling away from the mansion as Rowena settles inside. Rowena looks out the window, her reflection visible as she watches the familiar scenery pass by.
A narration bubble confirms the group is finally off to visit the Pharma estate.
Rowena glances to the side, her expression becoming thoughtful as they travel toward their destination. Rowena notes that Claude, seated across from her, is still in a noticeably bad mood. She wonders if his foul mood is due to Sir Lawson acting as her security detail today.
Rowena considers his past resentment toward the knight and wonders if she should have left him behind.
Rowena notices Sarah looking unwell and asks if she wants to sleep to combat motion sickness. Sarah, looking pale and dazed, asks for permission to take a nap during the long ride.
Rowena gives her a kind nod of approval. Sarah thanks her lady as she prepares to rest.
Sarah closes her eyes and begins to breathe softly, falling into a deep and much-needed sleep.
Rowena watches over her sleeping maid, reflecting on how exhausted Sarah must have been lately.
Rowena and Sarah walk ahead while Sir Lawson and another man watch them from a distance.
Rowena asks if reading the journals will confirm Claude is the same entity as the guardian spirit. Claude believes that a proper examination of the materials will eventually yield some useful information for them.
Rowena asks if she can inquire about something. Claude agrees but refuses to promise a clear answer.
Rowena is visibly annoyed by the man's dismissive and arrogant attitude during their conversation.
Rowena hesitates for a moment, looking away as she prepares to voice a personal question.
Rowena asks Lord Claude if they were actually acquainted with one another in the past.
Rowena notes that she still has no memory of the time she went missing recently.
Rowena wonders if she met him during her disappearance and then simply forgot the encounter.
Claude remains silent, his unreadable expression suggesting he is carefully weighing his response. Claude states they haven't met yet, only knowing families. Rowena reflects on his use of the word yet.
Claude reveals they first meet at the Emperor's birthday, though that date has not arrived yet.
Claude fidgets uncomfortably in the carriage as Rowena processes his revelation about their future meeting.
Rowena excitedly asks if that is when she meets the version of him rumored to be attractive. Claude stares at her in silence, clearly unimpressed by her sudden interest in his physical appearance. Claude reminds her that she previously claimed to have absolutely no interest in his looks. Rowena wonders aloud how handsome he must be for such rumors to spread. Claude simply sighs.
Claude warns Rowena not to expect much, stating that nothing good ever comes from meeting him.
Rowena asks if an incident occurs at the celebrations. Claude claims nothing happens during the party.
Claude specifies that the major event actually takes place after the birthday celebrations have concluded. As the carriage hits a bump, Rowena observes that the entire situation feels quite peculiar. Claude wonders aloud why Rowena was the one he encountered, then lapses back into silence. Claude claims to know her misfortune best, leaving Rowena looking startled and deeply unsettled. Rowena is confused, pointing out his contradictory claims about their past knowledge of each other.
Rowena falls into a contemplative silence, her expression shadowed by a growing sense of worry.
Claude turns his head away, his face partially obscured as he retreats into his own thoughts.
A close-up of Rowena's hand clenching her dress highlights her mounting anxiety during the ride.
The carriage finally arrives at the grand gates of the Viscount estate of Pharma.
The scene shifts to a well-appointed study filled with elegant furniture and a large desk.
A hand reaches out as a warm voice greets Rowena upon her arrival at the estate.
Anthony Pharma, the third Viscount, welcomes Rowena and remarks on how long it has been.
Anthony compliments Rowena's growth while she politely returns the greeting to her uncle.
Anthony mentions he has a prior engagement in the evening, apologizing for his limited availability today.
Rowena requests permission to spend time in her grandmother's former study while she is visiting.
Anthony agrees, suggesting she use the study located within the estate's secret chamber.
Claude is surprised by the secret chamber. Rowena whispers it was created for her grandmother.
Rowena whispers to Claude that her grandfather had the secret chamber created specifically for her grandmother.
Rowena and Claude stand before a massive bookshelf, hoping to find her grandmother's journals.
Rowena pushes a hidden mechanism, causing the bookshelf to creak open and reveal a hidden path. Rowena hopes that her grandmother's journals will contain the clues they need to understand his presence.
Rowena looks at the numbered volumes, noting her grandmother faced everything at her current age.
Rowena selects the 18th journal from the shelf, deciding to begin her investigation with this book.
Rowena begins flipping through the pages while Claude stands behind her, watching the process silently.
A close-up shows Rowena's hand as she carefully opens the aged cover of the selected journal.
Rowena pauses mid-read, her expression becoming serious as something in the text catches her attention.
Rowena's eye widens in shock as she discovers a startling revelation within the pages of the journal.
Claude notices her intense reaction and watches her with a questioning and alert expression. Rowena looks down at the page, her face pale as she softly speaks the man's name.
Rowena stares at Claude with a look of utter disbelief, demanding to know his true identity.
A final illustration depicts a man embracing a woman amidst a decorative flowery border.
Rowena gazes intensely at the man before her, softly whispering Lord Claude's name. Rowena demands to know Claude's true identity, her eyes filled with shock and suspicion.
Claude questions her confusion while Rowena clarifies she is asking for more than a name.
Claude remains silent, his unreadable gaze hinting at a hidden and deeply troubled history.
Claude asks about the journal's contents as Rowena looks at the books with mounting worry. Rowena asks Claude if he will be completely honest if she shares the journal's secrets.
Claude offers a somber and brief agreement, ready to listen to her unsettling discovery.
Rowena begins relaying the journal's contents, noting her grandmother once married her original suitor.
The journal reveals the grandmother married the Count of Hanover before ultimately taking her own life.
Claude looks visibly shaken by the tragic revelation, sweat beading on his pale, ghostly face.
Rowena reads how her grandmother awakened in the past, returning before her ill-fated marriage began. Rowena notes that her grandmother initially had no recollection of the tragic previous timeline.
The memories eventually returned only after the grandmother encountered a mysterious entity called her guardian spirit.
Claude asks for clarification, questioning if the woman truly traveled back through time itself.
Rowena instructs him to interpret every word carefully as they stand amidst the ancient books.
Claude curses internally, his expression darkening as he processes the implications of the grandmother's journal.
Claude realizes Rowena might share his origins, despite his assumption that her amnesia prevented issues.
He contemplates the journal's warnings, fearing Rowena might remember a specific dark day from her future.
Claude worries that Rowena may eventually uncover the truth behind his past actions and motives. A cold chill settles over Claude as he fears she will discover everything he once did.
Rowena admits she cannot stop wondering if Claude's future self is responsible for something terrible. Rowena asks Claude directly if he plans to introduce her to someone harmful in the future.
Claude reacts with genuine shock and confusion to Rowena's bizarre and unexpected accusation of betrayal. Rowena explains that the grandmother's guardian spirit revealed its original form just before it vanished.
The spirit was actually her father, who felt responsible for arranging her disastrous first marriage.
The father blamed himself for forcing the wedding that led to his daughter's ultimate demise.
Rowena fears a similar bad event awaits her, matching the grim fate her grandmother endured.
Claude firmly denies ever introducing her to anyone, while Rowena watches him with deep suspicion. Claude reveals they were never close and considers their relationship to have been one of enemies.
Rowena is startled by the mention of being enemies, but Claude dismissively ends the conversation.
Rowena returns her focus to the journal, noticing another entry that mirrors her mother's words.
She reads that the spirit vanished immediately after interfering with her grandmother's forced marriage arrangement.
Claude wonders if he is destined to protect Rowena from the misfortune in her future.
Claude clenches his fist, reflecting on his wasted revenge and his complicated history with the Duke.
Claude recalls the certainty that Rowena Blooming died on a specific day in the future timeline. Claude decides his revenge can wait, noting there are still many future opportunities for him.
Despite their ill-fated connection, Claude believes he should be satisfied, even if she eventually hates him.
He observes an image of her past suffering, trying to convince himself not to be fazed.
A deep sense of uneasiness plagues Claude as he stares at his own spectral Arn.
Claude views Rowena as an insultingly naive girl who currently has no reason to doubt him.
Claude reflects on how she cannot imagine he once plunged her life into absolute despair.
While watching a memory of his younger self eating, Claude questions why he feels so conflicted.
Standing behind the ghost of his past, Claude wonders why he is currently feeling so afraid.
Rowena's voice breaks his trance, calling out to Lord Claude as he remains lost in thought.
Rowena asks if he is all right, noting that he has suddenly become very quiet and withdrawn.
Claude sighs and brushes off her concern, stating his silence should not be a surprise.
Claude demands to be left alone while Rowena dismissively agrees to give the man space. Rowena decides to let him brood while she continues searching for more entries in the journals. A specific line in the journal asks why the writer is always filled with such anger.
Rowena catches a fleeting glimpse of Claude falling into a silent and thoughtful observation of him. Rowena selects a journal she deems perfect for the moment and slides it from the bookshelf.
Settling comfortably into a large chair, Rowena begins to flick through the pages of the old book. The journal text advises the reader not to doubt themselves in anger, calling it the purest emotion.
Rowena pauses her reading, reflecting deeply on the mysterious wisdom contained within her grandmother's written words.
She compares traditionally good men like Lawson and Anthony to those with frequent social entanglements with women.
With a small, weary sigh, Rowena closes the journal and prepares to shift her focus elsewhere. A tight focus on Rowena's blue eye highlights her intense concentration as she observes the quiet room.
Rowena observes Claude walking away, internally labeling him as arrogant, emotionless, and a deeply pessimistic man. She reflects on his wretched temper and wonders how someone can be so bitter during every conversation.
Despite his occasional assistance, Rowena believes Claude simply doubts her ability to get things done on her own. The long carriage ride finally takes its toll, causing Rowena to let out a tired, wide yawn.
Rowena decides to get some shut-eye as the spectral Claude stands silently in the background watching.
Claude stares at the girl, questioning if she has truly fallen into a deep sleep so quickly.
He contemplates the mysterious reasons why he was brought back in time to 4 years ago.
Claude wonders if Rowena was pulled back to the past specifically because of his own dark history.
Looking at Rowena Blooming, he congratulates her on the opportunity to not choose him this time.
A flashback shows a young boy named Enoch dashing through a hallway filled with smoke and fire.
Gasping for breath, Enoch continues his desperate sprint through the burning ruins of his family home.
Covered in soot and tears, Enoch calls out for his father as the flames close in around him.
A memory shows Enoch's father placing a hand on his head, reminding him to stay at the estate.
The father tells the boy that he is personally responsible for protecting the family while he is away.
A woman comforts the young, crying Enoch, telling him everything will be all right, despite the raging fire.
She promises to protect him no matter what happens, her expression filled with determination amidst the heat.
Enoch reflects on his failure to protect her as a charred leg is shown amidst the flames.
Gritting his teeth in grief, Enoch recalls the heavy promise he once made to his late father.
The father departs to see Duke Blooming while the children watch him walk through the front doors.
A single tear falls as the young boy's eye reflects the orange glow of the destructive fire.
Following the tragedy, a bandaged Enoch sits alone on a bed, mourning the name of Duke Blooming.
A man's gloved hand reaches out to the injured boy, offering a chance to finally receive help.
The mysterious voice urges the boy to take revenge for the death of his father.
In the present, Claude's eyes narrow as he remains lost in the dark memories of his past.
Rowena startles awake with a gasp as she spots Claude's reflection in the ornate mirror behind her.
The sudden shock causes Rowena to tip over a vase, spilling water and flowers everywhere.
Claude observes the scene, noting that his perception of her changes every time he sees her.
He reflects on how this version of Rowena Blooming is vastly different from the one he knew.
Rowena stands in the messy room as her maid, Sarah, reacts with shock to the spilled water. Sarah offers her apologies while Rowena tells her to be more careful in the hallways.
Sarah trots away to find a cloth, noting that Rowena is now completely soaked by the vase's water.
Rowena turns her attention to Lord Claude, noticing that he is staring at her with interest. She asks if he has something to say, but Claude remains silent, keeping his thoughts to himself.
Water drips from Rowena's dress as she reflects on the lack of grace for a noble lady.
Claude remarks on her sudden wild side, catching Rowena off guard with his unexpected and dry observation.
Rowena asks if he is feeling better, noting his complete silence during their time at the pharma estate.
She looks at him with concern, asking how he is doing as water drips from her wet hair.
Claude observes that she hasn't changed her treatment of him despite needing to cope with his bitter behavior. Rowena looks at him with a bewildered expression, clearly not understanding the true meaning of his words. Rowena laughs, suggesting he should just apologize, but Claude clarifies that was not what he meant.
Rowena smiles brightly, interpreting his caring questions as a sign of his growing concern for her.
She declares that he must be her guardian spirit, while Claude questions her with a confused expression. Claude asks what she means, while Rowena admits she never got a chance to mention this before. Rowena discovers journal entries explaining a guardian spirit's ability to sync and possess protectees.
Rowena notes that Claude finally seems to be caring about her feelings for once.
Claude lets out a tired sigh, questioning why she chose this moment to tell him.
Claude realizes emotion syncing is active as he stares at her with newfound reluctant insight.
Rowena reflects on how this ability explains the confusing and intense emotions she has experienced.
Claude dismisses syncing as useless while pondering the true nature of the possession ability mentioned. Rowena admits she isn't sure, noting the journal said it would be used when needed.
Claude declares the explanation useless, causing Rowena to react with frustration at his blunt dismissal.
Claude reflects on how confusing it is to suddenly experience the raw emotions of another.
He realizes he is sharing current Rowena's feelings, contrasting with the version he once knew.
A flashback reveals Claude was once a man who never treated anyone with his heart.
Claude recalls being emotionally dead inside, completely unable to feel anything for the people around.
Even with past lovers, he remained cold and detached, never forming a genuine emotional connection.
This detachment continued even through his eventual marriage, leaving his personal life hollow and cold. Claude reflects on the night he lost his parents and home to a devastating fire.
The trauma of his severe burns and loss left him completely immune to all future emotions.
A young, heavily bandaged Claude sits in a bed, mourning his lost family and hollow heart.
He blames Rowena's father for taking everything away from him during that fateful burning night. Claude resents Rowena for forcing him to feel these useless emotions again in this timeline. He stares intently, viewing these newfound feelings as an obstacle to his ultimate goal of revenge.
Sarah interrupts the conversation, calling out to Rowena as Claude stands silently in the background.
Rowena asks if everything is all right at the estate after noting Sarah's slightly delayed return.
Sarah informs Rowena that her father has called for her and wants her brought along.
Sarah wipes Rowena's face, reminding her they are expecting a guest in the drawing room.
Sarah announces that Lord Lawrence is arriving, instantly catching Claude's attention with a specific name.
Claude reacts with surprise, questioning if the mentioned guest is indeed Howard as he stares ahead.
Rowena reacts with pure joy and excitement, her eyes sparkling at the news of the visitor. Rowena laughs, realizing she should call him His Royal Highness instead of using his name. She giggles while explaining that growing up together makes one easily forget formal social manners. Eager to see Howard again, Rowena tells Sarah they must immediately prepare to depart together.
Claude murmurs in agreement, his expression becoming solemn as he watches Rowena prepare for her guest. Claude watches a carriage depart, reflecting on the man who was always by Rowena's side.
He identifies the man as Howard Lawrence, Rowena Blooming's childhood friend from the previous timeline. A close-up reveals Reuben Lawrence, the Emperor's nephew, who shares a history with the Blooming family. Howard Lawrence is introduced as the Grand Duke, shown amidst a backdrop of vibrant blooming flowers.
Howard Lawrence is described as the only nephew to the current emperor, standing with his back turned.
Reuben Lawrence took the throne after Howard's father died in an unfortunate accident before the elections.
Because Howard was his brother's son, he was destined to be a threat to the emperor.
Claude reflects on how Howard was always a persistent and annoying pain in the emperor's eye.
Rowena whispers a question to Claude, asking what Howard is up to in the 4-year future.
Claude admits they aren't close, but acknowledges that he knows the details of Howard's eventual fate.
Following his brother's death, Reuben Lawrence granted Howard the title of Grand Duke in honor.
Since Howard was not of age, he was never given a proper dukedom or his own estate.
Howard lived knowing he was merely a puppet controlled by the hands of the current emperor. The title "Protect Me from Despair" appears in glowing red letters against a dark, moody background. A portrait of a noblewoman hangs on a wall above an ornate dresser and lit candles.
Rowena and her father sit at a table in the dining room, enjoying a quiet tea session.
Rowena clinks her teacup, addressing her father as she takes a sip of the drink.
Rowena beams with delight, telling her father that the tea he provided is absolutely spectacular.
Her father smiles warmly, explaining the tea is a capital trend he brought home for her.
Claude realizes his emotional connection to Rowena allows him to understand her perspective more clearly.
He notes that Rowena's pure heart is a direct result of Willard Blooming's kind parenting.
Claude compares Willard to his own father, recalling a time before tragedy struck his family.
The narrative confirms that Claude's father and Duke Blooming were once the closest of friends.
Tragically, Claude's father went to meet the Duke on the very day he supposedly passed.
While grand rumors of his death circulated, his father's remains were never actually recovered.
Following the loss of his family, the Emperor took in the orphaned Claude out of sympathy.
The Emperor secretly hired mages to treat Claude's burns, though the physical scars never faded.
Claude begins to question if the Duke was truly responsible for the burning of his mansion.
A haunting memory shows a young Claude weeping as flames consume his home.
A sense of deep-seated intuition washes over Claude during his quiet moment of reflection.
Claude clenches his fist, feeling as though a vital piece of the truth remains missing.
Rowena asks when Howard is arriving, and Claude confirms the royal guest will be there soon.
Rowena excitedly recalls her upcoming ceremony and Howard's intention to discuss the celebration details with her.
Willard Blooming wonders if Howard will receive a dowry from the Emperor after the upcoming ceremony.
Claude believes the Emperor will do everything possible to avoid providing resources to the Grand Duke. He reflects on the Emperor's paranoia that Howard is a potential threat to the imperial throne.
Claude predicts the Emperor will isolate Howard and leave him powerless until his eventual demise.
He muses that treason is Howard's only escape, validating Rowena's wish for a simpler status.
Willard Blooming interjects to disagree with Rowena's assessment regarding the necessity of Howard's title. Willard explains that the title of Grand Duke serves as a vital shield against external threats. He notes the Emperor would find it difficult to revoke a title he has already anointed.
A transition marks the passage of time as the focus shifts back to the present.
Claude acknowledges that the information he has gathered regarding the political situation is entirely accurate. He observes a memory of Willard interacting with a young Howard in the palace hallways.
Claude struggles to understand how such a wise man could have ultimately betrayed his father.
A knock at the door interrupts their tea session, signaling the arrival of a household servant. The servant announces the delivery of refreshments to accompany the Duke and Rowena's tea. Rowena glances over her shoulder, her attention caught by the sudden arrival of their expected guest. Rowena gasps in surprise as Howard Lawrence makes his grand entrance into the drawing room. Howard Lawrence is formally introduced as the Grand Duke amidst a backdrop of vibrant, blooming flowers.
Rowena hugs Howard excitedly while Claude watches the reunion with a stunned and bewildered expression.
Claude questions what the pair is doing while Howard politely greets Willard in the room.
Howard asks for the honor of pouring tea for both Rowena and the Duke.
He explains that he handpicked the gift of refreshments specifically for Rowena to enjoy.
Rowena laughs joyfully, though Claude remains skeptical of Howard's overly kind and helpful behavior.
Claude recalls his past assignment to tail Howard's whereabouts at the request of the Emperor.
A flashback shows a hooded Claude shadowing Howard through the city streets during the previous timeline.
Claude discovered a different, more complex side to Howard beneath his kind and naive public persona.
He reflects on how Howard's secrets were so intricate that they were nearly impossible to trace.
Claude admits that he chose to keep Howard's secrets hidden from the Emperor during that time.
In the present, Howard offers a gentle smile that masks the complexity Claude knows lies beneath.
Claude watches Howard through the window, noting he may be more dangerous than the Emperor himself.
A mysterious hooded figure stands outside the castle, observing the estate from a distance.
The figure smiles as they remark that a significant turning point in the timeline is unfolding. The hooded entity urges Enoch Claude to hurry as the flow of destiny begins to shift.
A hand reaches toward the sky as glowing butterflies flutter around the majestic palace spires.
The figure notes that Claude is the only person aware of the future events about to occur.
The hooded figure fades away, naming Claude the sole guardian of this current timeline's fate.
Claude's brooch shimmers as he settles into his role as the hidden protector of the timeline. Claude reflects on the significance of Howard visiting the Blooming estate at this specific point.
Within the ornate palace hallway, Claude realizes that the fated day is rapidly approaching. The Emperor asks for updates on his request, and his aide confirms men are already preparing. Smirking, the Emperor notes that the coming-of-age ceremony draws near.
Howard Lawrence stares forward with a cold expression, murmuring that he cannot wait for the event. The title, Protect Me from Despair, glows brightly against a soft and airy white background. Howard and Rowena walk side by side along a stone path in the lush estate gardens. Rowena observes that the spring still arrives early in this region as they stroll together. Smiling warmly, Howard notes that Etezian is still plagued by the lingering cold winds of winter. Rowena remarks on the southern location while Howard mentions his favorite flower is set to bloom.
Howard asks if the daffodils at Lake Lehman are still beautiful, and Rowena confirms they are.
Rowena reminisces about playing on the hills of Trom, admitting she misses those childhood days.
Rowena asks Howard if things are still harsh at his estate, and he naturally confirms it.
Howard asks if she heard that the palace checks his letters, making him unable to write. Claude notes that monitoring those letters was once his specific job.
A transition occurs as the scene prepares to shift back to their ongoing garden conversation. Howard mentions he has company since his former nanny is still fulfilling duties at the estate.
Howard notes the Emperor allowed this visit under night escort, causing Rowena to react with surprise. Rowena whispers that she must be more cautious while speaking, prompting a laugh from Howard.
Howard asks how much longer she plans to stay, and Rowena realizes she has information.
Rowena states she has something important to share regarding the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony.
A close-up shows Howard's hand reaching out toward Rowena in a formal and inviting gesture.
Howard expresses his hope that Rowena will join him on his journey back to Atesia.
Howard asks if the arrangement is acceptable while Rowena stares back at him, looking startled.
Claude watches from a distance as Rowena reacts to Howard's sudden informal travel invitation.
Rowena gladly accepts Howard's offer of an escort leading up to the coming-of-age ceremony. Howard formally promises Lady Blooming that he will do his best to keep her safe.
The childhood friends hold hands in the sunny garden, silhouetted against an ornate garden arch.
Howard lets out a joyful laugh, breaking the formal tension of their recent garden conversation.
Howard laughs that he can't keep a straight face, while Rowena asks when he learned such formal speech. Howard retorts he was always better at manners.
Rowena giggles, claiming she was always more mature, while Claude observes their interaction with irritation.
Rowena collapses onto a floral rug, exclaiming how full she is after the refreshments.
Lying on her back, Rowena looks up with a contented and sleepy expression after eating. Claude stands silently in the room, his translucent form contrasted against the luxurious furniture.
Rowena notes they didn't speak today. Claude dryly thinks it was because of someone else's presence.
Rowena sighs that it's too bad, noting Howard will be staying at the estate. Rowena wonders if people will think she's crazy for talking to herself. Claude questions her logic.
Rowena decides they need a secret way for Claude to communicate when others are nearby.
Claude reflects that while dismissing a servant was easy, dealing with Howard will be difficult.
Rowena admits that speaking to Claude in the presence of others is a major challenge. Rowena questions if public communication is necessary. Claude warns that they must be prepared for anything.
Claude walks away, thinking that miscommunication during a critical situation could lead to a disaster.
Rowena asks if journals define possession as a spirit entering a body. Claude confirms that assumption. Claude murmurs a quiet acknowledgement to Rowena's question while reflecting on his current spiritual state.
Rowena looks over at Claude with a curious and slightly confused expression on her face. Claude recalls tracking Howard and remembers the Grand Duke disappeared right after the coming-of-age ceremony.
Claude assumes Princess Flora or an Imperial agent orchestrated Howard's disappearance in the previous timeline.
Claude reflects on how he hid the details of Howard's movements from the Emperor's knowledge.
A flashback shows Claude turning toward a sound, realizing nothing significant had occurred yet.
Claude concludes Howard is a reliable ally for Rowena now, despite his dangerous past associations. Clenching his gaze, Claude resolves that Howard must not be involved in the upcoming ceremony incident.
Rowena addresses Lord Claude, asking what will happen if they eventually end up back in Atessian.
Rowena smiles warmly as she reflects on the peaceful moment in the garden. Claude asks why Rowena mentioned a mage, noting that guardian spirits have a connection to magic.
Claude promises he is doing everything possible to return Rowena to her rightful point in time.
Rowena admits that while she dislikes his attitude, Claude is clearly trying to protect her happiness.
Rowena credits Claude for her reunion with Howard while he stares silently into the distance.
Claude notes that the pair was fated to reunite at this specific moment in the timeline.
Claude startles Rowena by suggesting she might never have the opportunity to see Howard again. Looking confused, Rowena asks the spirit what his cryptic warning is supposed to mean.
Claude addresses Rowena Blooming directly as he prepares to explain the dangers ahead.
Claude warns that seeing Howard again depends on Rowena being extremely cautious at the upcoming ceremony. Rowena wonders if Howard's destiny is truly tied to her own impending misfortune.
Claude promises to prevent disaster if she follows his lead, while Howard's shadow looms at the palace.
Howard clenches a dagger, musing on using the power of possession to achieve his goals.
Claude repeats his warning about the ceremony over a memory of Howard's youth. Claude insists everything will be fine if she obeys his instructions during the event.
Claude vows to do whatever is necessary to stop fate from unfolding as it once did. Standing among red butterflies, the spirit reiterates his plan to utilize his unique possession power. Claude admits he lacks full details of the ceremony since his past self was not present. Despite his missing memories, Claude states there is one truth he knows for certain. Claude reveals Howard's disappearance after the ceremony, while Rowena confirms her official debut.
Claude questions her late debut. Rowena explains she simply lacked interest in social circles.
Rowena notes her family's isolation and her father's advice to avoid social events until she's older. Claude explains the political rivalry causing the Emperor to isolate Howard and Duke Blooming. Claude urges Rowena not to feel defeated by the grim news regarding their political situation.
Claude emphasizes that failure is inevitable when people refuse to take action against fate.
Claude stares intensely at Rowena, repeating his firm commitment to stopping the upcoming tragedy. Raising a finger, Claude tells Rowena there are several things she must remember.
The spirit's form flickers as he begins to outline the steps of his plan. The scene shifts to the grand architecture of the manor's interior as time passes. A servant brings a box to Willard Blooming, who thanks them for the delivery.
Willard reflects on Rowena coming of age as he prepares for her special day.
Willard stares blankly at the wall with his hands clasped together in quiet thought.
Clenching his fingers tightly, Willard murmurs that it is still too early for what's coming.
Claude notes Rowena has no memory of the fire that destroyed her family's mansion.
Claude decides he will reveal the full truth to Rowena only when the time is right.
A knock at the door interrupts Willard's solitude as he waits at his desk.
Rowena enters her father's office with a maid, asking why she was summoned.
Willard welcomes his daughter, who looks surprised by the box sitting on his desk.
Resting his hand on a stack of letters, Willard asks if Rowena is leaving for Etesian.
Willard confirms the Emperor's edict, causing Rowena to react with shock and disbelief. Claude explains that the Emperor has officially designated a new house to be a Prince Elector. Claude notes House Robar's removal from power and resolves to investigate the new appointee. 7 houses hold Prince Elector authority in the Empire, sitting just below the throne in rank. House Blooming replaced House Claude after the fire. Willard prepares a gift for Rowena's journey. Willard pushes the dark blue box across the table toward his daughter.
Rowena asks what is inside the box Willard offers for her coming-of-age celebration.
A clicking sound echoes as Rowena lifts the lid of the ornate blue case.
Rowena's eyes widen and she gasps at the sight of the object inside the box.
A magnificent sword with a gem-encrusted hilt shines brightly from its red velvet lining.
Willard mentions her master's praise for her skills as Rowena admires her new sword.
Willard notes the hunting tournament follows the ceremony and suggests using the sword then. Rowena thanks him.
Rowena smiles with a slight bead of sweat, appearing both grateful and somewhat overwhelmed.
Claude warns Rowena that the Duke will gift her a blade, reminding her that weapons are prohibited at the palace.
Claude explains that a previously discovered weapon was traced to the Duke, warning Rowena that she could be framed.
Claude advises Rowena to leave any gift behind to avoid trouble, and she hesitantly agrees. Claude warns Rowena that many people will be plotting various schemes during the upcoming ceremony.
Claude sternly instructs Rowena not to act during the ceremony until he gives her the word.
Rowena resolves to act for their benefit, acknowledging the harsh and dangerous nature of high society.
Rowena bows and promises her father she will treasure the gift he gave her.
Willard flips through papers and expresses his deep concern for Rowena's safety while in the capital. Willard cautions Rowena that any casual behavior with the prince will attract unwanted attention from others.
Willard strictly orders Rowena to remain hidden from the Emperor's notice, and she dutifully accepts.
Willard reflects on his past efforts to protect Rowena, noting that her debut is now unavoidable.
Willard inwardly wishes that Rowena could stay safely in Belfort, away from the dangers of high society. Willard sighs and reminds Rowena of her identity and the weight of their family's destiny. Willard notes their lack of allies in Etesian and acknowledges Rowena's refusal to tolerate injustice.
Willard asks Rowena to exercise restraint for his sake, regardless of what occurs during her trip.
Rowena promises to hold back to prevent trouble, hoping her father's request will keep things stable.
Willard tells Rowena to focus on her lessons until the ceremony and bids her a warm farewell.
Rowena watches her father leave, her expression filled with a mix of surprise and lingering concern. Willard walks away with a heavy heart, leaving Rowena alone as he exits the room. A close-up reveals the profound sadness and worry etched into Willard's eyes as he continues walking. Willard's inner voice laments that everything is his fault as the scene fades into a dark void.
A flashback shows Willard regretting his failure to stop a young man, fearing he has endangered Rowena.
Rowena stands quietly in the library, looking out of the frame with a thoughtful and pensive expression.
Willard silently pleads for nothing to go wrong during the ceremony as he walks away in regret.
Bright sunlight fills a luxurious room in the manor, signaling a shift in the story's timeline.
Rowena's hand firmly shuts a book, marking the end of her solitary study session for the day.
Rowena looks over her shoulder with an expectant gaze, sensing the arrival of a visitor at the door.
A maid announces Howard's arrival as he steps into the room with a polite and friendly smile.
Howard apologizes for being late, explaining he had urgent matters to handle earlier in the morning. Howard mentions he had to visit somewhere and presents a sealed envelope to a curious Rowena.
Rowena stares at the letter in Howard's hand, asking him what he has brought for her today.
A close-up focuses on Howard's confident smile and the mysterious letter he is about to offer.
Howard reveals that the letter is a formal recommendation for the medical academy, surprising Rowena with it.
Rowena reacts with joy, realizing the recommendation is intended for Victor's benefit. Rowena laughs and thanks Howard, while Claude stands in the background watching their interaction with crossed arms. Claude gazes out from the scene with a serious and unreadable expression, seemingly detached from the happiness. Narration details how the Emperor replaced magic with medicine and allowed nobles to recommend scholarship candidates.
Claude reflects on the frequent conversations between Rowena and Howard, noting they haven't discussed spirits yet.
Claude observes Rowena closely, thinking that at least she understands when and where to stop her actions.
The scene shifts to the manor's courtyard where Howard asks Rowena if they should begin heading up. Howard remarks that it has been a very long time since they last embarked on such a journey.
Sir Lawson and 2 young children bow respectfully as they welcome Howard and Rowena to the estate.
Rowena greets Sir Lawson warmly and asks Victor and Mary if they have been doing well lately.
Howard watches the children with a gentle and fond smile, enjoying the peacefulness of the reunion. The characters are depicted in a cute, small style as Howard playfully interacts with the 2 children.
Rowena suggests that Mary go play with the toys and dolls that have been prepared for her.
Mary looks toward the side with wide, sparkling eyes, clearly excited by the prospect of playing.
Rowena gently takes Mary's hand and smiles, happy to spend a quiet moment with the young girl.
Rowena and a maid sit with Mary, who looks up at a strange presence.
Rowena tells Mary she's getting snacks and asks the young girl to wait there.
As Rowena departs, Claude manifests before Mary, who stares directly at the translucent spirit.
Rowena gleefully selects a large assortment of macarons at the dessert counter with a maid.
A close-up reveals Mary's curious gaze as she continues to observe the spirit nearby.
Mary opens her mouth to speak, her attention fully captured by the mysterious figure.
Mary questions the spirit's identity, leaving Claude startled that the child can see him.
Claude reacts with sheer disbelief and visible sweat, shocked by the girl's sudden perception.
Claude asks the young girl if she is actually able to perceive his ghostly form.
Mary confirms that she can see him, looking up at the spirit with wide eyes.
Mary asks if he is a prince or a mister assigned to keep Rowena SIDS.
Claude awkwardly accepts the title of Mr., appearing somewhat flustered by the child's innocent questions.
Claude realizes Mary feigned ignorance earlier and hears about a promise she made her mother.
The spirit looks bewildered as he ponders the girl's description of his form as foggy.
Claude asks if she often sees spirits, and Mary mentions his unique blue fog.
Mary smiles and clarifies that there is more to his appearance than just the fog.
Mary points out the red butterflies fluttering around Claude, much to the spirit's intense surprise.
Claude stares in silent shock, processing the information about the mystical red butterflies around him.
A plate is suddenly piled high with a colorful and messy assortment of sweet macarons.
Rowena returns with the treats, triumphantly announcing her arrival to a very surprised Mary.
Rowena admits she grabbed every sweet available while Mary looks on with pure, sugary delight.
Claude grumbles inwardly about Rowena's habit of interrupting at the most inconvenient times imaginable.
Rowena senses something is wrong, but Claude quickly dismisses her concerns to avoid any suspicion.
Claude reflects on Rowena's poor timing as the scene shifts toward a more somber mood.
Mary has fallen fast asleep, resting her head against Rowena in a moment of peace.
A maid expresses her gratitude to Rowena for her kind suggestions regarding the two children.
The group discusses the Academy's dormitory system while Mary slumbers quietly in her seat nearby. A man hesitates to leave Mary alone and asks Howard for more time to decide.
Howard addresses Rowena, noting they still have time before the new year officially begins. Claude warns Rowena to listen silently without responding because there are too many people around. Claude reveals the startling news to Rowena that Mary is actually capable of seeing him. Claude suggests Mary has magic potential and could attend an educational institution alongside Victor.
The spirit explains that magic institutes still exist but are carefully hidden from public view.
Claude narrates that Princess Flora secretly manages a magic institution despite the Emperor's official ban.
Claude notes that entering the Mage Academy requires a recommendation from a mage, not nobility. Howard presents Rowena with a letter revealing he secured a high-ranking mage's recommendation for her.
Claude believes Princess Flora would welcome a recommendation from a high mage for her secret school. Princess Flora walks through a grand, chandelier-lit palace hallway accompanied by her silent attendant.
Narrator Claude describes Princess Flora's character as the scene focuses on her gentle, smiling face.
A decorative portrait captures Howard and Rowena together, framed by blooming roses and sparkling light.
The scene shifts to the manor where Rowena sits at a table, lost in pot.
A maid carefully pours hot tea into an ornate cup as Rowena remains deep in reflection. The dark-haired maid calls out to Rowena, trying to get the young lady's drifting attention. The maid informs Rowena that the Duke has arrived and requests her presence in his office. A formal letter addressed to the Duchess rests on Willard's desk amidst the fading evening light. Willard sits in his office, looking weary as he contemplates urgent matters regarding the estate's future.
A sharp knock at the door interrupts Willard's solitude, causing him to look up expectantly.
Rowena enters the room and asks her father how long he has been back at home.
Willard welcomes his daughter but states he has an important question before returning to the capital. Willard asks Rowena why she sought his aide Sir Curtis's help in finding a secret mage.
Willard reveals that his aide, Sir Curtis, reported her secretive search for a mage.
Willard expresses concern that her actions regarding mages could cause trouble before the ceremony. Rowena hesitates as her father questions her motivation for tracking down a forbidden mage.
Rowena explains that she is trying to help a child suffering from a rare disease.
Rowena explains that despite medical treatment, the child showed no progress, forcing her to find mages.
Rowena apologizes for not informing her father earlier, while Willard looks on with a grave expression.
Willard remembers the specific sick child from the orphanage and apologizes for his lack of foresight.
Willard notes that his aide, Sir Curtis, adheres strictly to the anti-mage imperial creed.
Willard reveals that another servant delivered the letter instead and successfully received a response.
Rowena is delighted to hear that a response came from a well-known mage. Willard decides to provide her with a different escort for her journey to see the mage.
Willard urges Rowena to go and return quickly before the upcoming ceremony begins.
A close-up shows the Duke's jaw as he reflects on his daughter heading to meet mages.
Disguised in cloaks, Rowena and a servant secretly travel through the woods toward their destination.
Rowena walks through the forest, determined to find help for the child in her care.
Rowena reflects on Harold's extreme loyalty and silence, traits her father highly praised for this mission.
Harold, a servant of the blooming house, carries the young boy through the dense woods.
Rowena is startled as Claude suddenly appears, making a playful attempt to scare her.
Claude explains that high-ranking mages can identify someone just by looking at their footprints.
Claude justifies their difficult forest path as Rowena grumbles about his ability to float effortlessly.
Harold informs Rowena that they are only a few minutes away from reaching the nearby village.
Harold mentions he has a change of clothes ready for Rowena once they reach the main mark. Harold presents a pair of sturdy shoes that Sarah asked him to gift her.
Rowena is touched to realize that her mate Sarah thoughtfully prepared these items for her journey.
Rowena thanks Harold for his assistance while Claude watches their exchange with a blank expression.
The group hears a rustling sound as they continue their quiet journey through the forest.
Harold glances toward a building as they finally arrive at their secret destination in town.
Harold points out the all-purpose shop where the mage's letter originated from.
Harold promises to wait outside while Rowena enters the shop to meet the contact. A small bell rings as Rowena pushes open the door to the cluttered shop.
The interior of the shop is filled with an eclectic mix of strange antiques and oddities.
A lavender-haired shopkeeper greets her warmly and asks if she is looking for anything specific.
Rowena nervously mentions she is looking for a cat statue with crimson eyes, a secret code.
The shopkeeper listens intently to her request, his expression turning serious at the mention of the statue. Recognizing the signal, the shopkeeper invites Rowena inside to discuss the matter privately.
The door creaks shut behind them as they move into the back room of the shop.
The group enters the private room while Claude's spectral form remains visible only to Rowena.
Rowena begins the consultation, asking the shopkeeper to first check the health of the young boy.
The young boy looks up curiously at the shopkeeper as the examination begins.
The shopkeeper observes the child closely, noticing something unusual about the boy's condition. The shopkeeper asks Rowena if she is familiar with the concept of magical streams within individuals.
Glowing golden energy surrounds the boy as the shopkeeper explains how stagnant magic causes illness. The shopkeeper reassures Rowena that proper magical education will effectively cure the boy's chronic condition.
Rowena excitedly asks if the shopkeeper would be willing to write a formal academy recommendation.
The shopkeeper refuses, fearing that drawing the princess's attention would put his own safety at risk.
The shopkeeper expresses his desire to stay uninvolved, but Claude reminds him he has already been paid.
Claude confronts the shopkeeper, warning him not to back out of the agreement so easily.
The shopkeeper sighs deeply as he realizes that the spectral figure is correct.
The shopkeeper addresses the spirit, noting that Claude has finally decided to speak up. Claude retorts that remaining silent and inactive is simply not his typical behavior.
Claude looks startled as he asks the shopkeeper if he knows his true identity. The shopkeeper confirms that he indeed recognizes the ghostly spirit standing before him. The shopkeeper points accusingly at Claude, identifying him as the man who erased his name. Mary watches with wonder as a mysterious red butterfly flutters across the dimly lit room. The shopkeeper smiles cryptically while repeating the phrase about the man who erased his name.
The shopkeeper praises Mary's sharp perception for being able to see the mystical red butterflies.
The mage explains that he personally raises these unusual and ethereal creatures.
He reveals that these butterflies specifically appear around individuals who have committed many sins.
The shopkeeper agrees to write Mary's recommendation, citing his complicated history with Lord Claude.
Claude is visibly bewildered by the shopkeeper's mention of a shared past between them. The mage cryptically explains that he has a significant debt to repay to the spirit. The shopkeeper asks Rowena if she has any other questions before he returns to work.
Rowena expresses her surprise and asks if the mage was already acquainted with Lord Claude.
The mage places a finger to his lips, gesturing for Rowena to remain silent.
He advises Rowena to simply maintain her bond with Claude for their mutual benefit.
A close-up captures the mage's enigmatic smile as he prepares to conclude their meeting. The group stands in shock as they witness the mage vanish using powerful magic.
Rowena is left breathless after realizing the shopkeeper just performed a high-level teleportation spell.
Claude remains deeply suspicious as he ponders the true identity of the mysterious shopkeeper.
The mage sits alone in his shop, resting his head on his hand thoughtfully.
A close-up shows the mage's pensive expression as he reflects on his past encounters.
A flashback reveals the mage ending a royal contract due to the Emperor's magic ban.
He informs his lord of his plan to keep a low profile to avoid trouble. The lord departs through a grand palace hallway after their somber and final conversation.
Back in the present, the mage reflects on his friend's life with a wistful smile.
Rowena sits alone at night, reading a book by the light of a single candle.
A close-up of the flickering candle flame highlights the quiet atmosphere of the room.
Claude's spectral form appears and asks Rowena for permission to ask her a personal question.
Rowena looks up from her book with a startled and wide-eyed expression of curiosity. Rowena asks the spirit why he is suddenly interested in her childhood and personal history.
Rowena taps her fingers against the book as she prepares to recount her past memories.
Rowena explains that she and Howard were close children because their fathers were longtime friends.
She remembers her father having many influential friends, including the Emperor and various other nobles.
Rowena recalls a specific unfortunate event that occurred while visiting a family friend's estate.
A memory shows a young, lonely boy sitting by himself in a dark palace corner.
Rowena smiles sadly, reflecting on how incredibly lonely that young boy must have been then.
She realizes her drive to help Victor and Mary stems from that childhood encounter.
A wide shot of a gazebo at sunset shows Claude wondering if the boy was Howard.
A young boy sits alone in a garden near a discarded wooden crutch.
The narrator explains that Howard was actually raised separately from his family's main estate.
A young Rowena with a crutch approaches the lonely boy.
proving he was a stranger.
Claude observes that there is clearly a deep and hidden connection between Rowena and Howard. He reflects on how Rowena's trust in Howard has persisted despite many years of separation. Claude admits that Howard's deep knowledge of Rowena makes him a threat to his revenge.
Snakes coil around a decorative dagger, symbolizing a trap set for an unsuspecting rival.
Claude decides he must take action to prevent Howard from falling into any more traps.
He realizes that keeping Howard close to Rowena is essential for her continued happiness.
Rowena looks forward with a gentle smile, wishing for Howard to stay by her side.
Rowena grips her arm in regret for not being able to help the boyvin.
She hopes the mysterious boy from her past eventually found the help he truly needed. Willard asks Rowena if she is ready for tomorrow's journey to the capital city.
Willard instructs Rowena to stay by Howard's side, citing the unpredictability of the upcoming events. Willard suggests the debutante event's restrictions are unfortunate, but Rowena dismisses the concern entirely.
Rowena reveals that she never possessed a desire to participate in high society circles.
The spectral Claude asks if her reluctance stems from her family's current social position. Claude notes the Duke's poor relationship with the Emperor, while Rowena begins to stand up. Rowena explains her opposition to the event is because the expected outcome seemed too obvious.
Rowena describes the tradition of finding love at a ball as incredibly dull and forced. Rowena expresses her preference for meeting someone through natural circumstances and building a genuine friendship.
Claude watches her silently, reflecting on her desires for a natural connection with someone.
Claude remembers her joy during their past dance, but doubts she viewed him as destiny.
Claude thinks Howard is a better target for her affection if she avoids high society.
Claude contemplates that Howard is much more suitable for her than he could ever be.
Claude stares ahead, inwardly wishing for Rowena to find true happiness in this current life.
Rowena smiles softly while Claude continues to wish for her future joy and fulfillment.
Claude prepares to add a final thought as he continues to observe his companion silently.
Claude resolves to facilitate a romance between Rowena and Howard Lawrence for her own sake.
A candle flickers in the dark, symbolizing a shift in the evening's quiet, introspective atmosphere.
Rowena walks through the dark hallway while poetic narration describes love blooming unexpectedly within her.
The narration continues by mentioning a specific voice and warmth as Rowena approaches a door. A close-up highlights Rowena's features as she moves quietly through the dimly lit manor.
The poetic text describes a metaphorical flower that is strengthened and will never wither away.
A silhouette of two figures appears as the text addresses Enoch regarding his true form.
The narration concludes that she would have loved him regardless of the form he took.
Rowena awakens in bed, looking dazed and exhausted after her long night of restless thoughts.
Possessing a maid's body, Claude greets Rowena and offers to help her prepare for travel.
Rowena blinks in confusion, her gaze narrowing as she tries to process her maid's behavior.
Claude, acting as the maid, wonders if Rowena has already noticed his secret spectral presence. Claude explains that possessing a servant is the most effective way to remain by her side.
Rowena asks how he entered the maid's body, and Claude describes the simple possession process.
Claude mentions he practiced his possession skills on sleeping people over the past several days.
Rowena hopes her own body wasn't used for practice. Claude clarifies his intent was freedom.
Rowena notes the convenience of his current form, but worries about the ceremony's strict social rules.
Rowena asks about his plans to possess Howard, which Claude considers ideal but potentially problematic.
Claude explains that lack of familiarity with Howard might cause others to grow highly suspicious.
Claude concludes the best candidates for possession are either very familiar people or total strangers. Claude assures her he is simply imitating the vessel's typical behavior to avoid any detection. Claude begins brushing Rowena's hair while mentioning that final preparations will occur in the capital.
Rowena laughs about the notorious Margrave brushing her hair while he warns about his lack of skill. Rowena begins singing the poetic lines about love blooming unannounced, catching her companion by surprise. The possessed maid freezes as Rowena continues the song that resonates deep within her. Claude asks the name of the song, but Rowena cannot recall where she first heard it.
Rowena looks up thoughtfully, unable to pinpoint the memory associated with the mysterious melodic tune.
Claude looks deeply concerned, suggesting she might have only heard the melody in passing. Claude clenches the hairbrush, fearing that Rowena's suppressed memories are slowly resurfacing against his wishes.
Rowena wears a gentle smile, unaware of the internal turmoil her song has caused her guardian.
Claude concludes that Rowena will never cooperate with him if her past memories fully return. The scene shifts to the bustling capital as a carriage travels loudly through the city streets.
Rowena peers out of the carriage window, her expression solemn as they arrive at their destination.
Dressed in elegant attire, Rowena sits quietly in the carriage, mentally preparing for the upcoming debutante. The group finally arrives at the towering and majestic imperial palace for the debutante ceremony.
Rowena looks visibly anxious and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the upcoming royal event.
Claude, still possessing the maid, notices Rowena's distress and asks if she is feeling nervous. Rowena admits she is a little bit.
Rowena nervously grips her gown while explaining her discomfort during her very first visit to the capital.
Rowena expresses her self-doubt, but the possessed maid offers reassurance and promises to stay by her side.
Claude explains he will release the possession and scout the palace in his spectral spirit form for the time being.
The possessed maid notes the necessity of investigating a few specific places before the ceremony begins.
Claude mentions a specific realization he made regarding the mechanics of his possession ability while testing it out.
Claude reveals that his spirit is automatically tethered and pulled back to Rowena's side when he moves too far. While the carriage travels, Claude shares his plan to utilize this tether to scout the ballroom. Rowena confirms her understanding. Claude asks about Lady Siona, whom Howard intended to introduce. Rowena identifies her as Lady Siona of Viscount House Grant. A flashback shows Howard and Rowena discussing Lady Siona over tea during a past meeting at his estate. Howard explains that Lady Siona would be a helpful social ally for Rowena to adjust to high society. Back in the carriage, Claude speculates that Howard understands trouble is likely to unfold during the upcoming debutante ceremony. Claude suggests they can handle issues as they arise despite many eyes watching. Rowena agrees with a hopeful smile.
As they approach their destination, Claude prepares to leave the maid's body and revert to his spirit form.
The maid's body begins to glow as the possessing spirit finally detaches and fades away completely.
Sarah rubs her eyes and groans as she regains consciousness after the spirit's sudden departure from her body. Sarah wakes up confused, questioning when Rowena managed to get fully dressed and ready without her assistance. Peering out the window, Sarah is shocked to realize they have already reached the capital's imperial palace. Sarah frets about sleeping in, but a nervous Rowena tries to downplay the servant's lapse to avoid suspicion. Rowena notes that possessed people lose all memory of their actions while serving as a vessel for a spirit.
The spectral Claude watches silently, reflecting on the potential danger of his memory-erasing possession ability.
Sarah regains her composure and informs Rowena that they are set to arrive at the entrance very soon.
Sarah exits the carriage first, heading toward the servants' quarters to fulfill her official duties for the night.
Rowena elegantly steps down from the ornate carriage as she officially arrives at the palace grounds.
A stranger calls out Rowena's name, startling her as she prepares to enter the grand imperial building.
The woman offers a friendly smile while approaching Rowena near the palace's grand stone staircase.
The newcomer introduces herself as Lady Morris from the Count Sherman estate and confirms Rowena's identity.
Lady Morris offers to escort Rowena to the designated waiting rooms for the upcoming royal ball. Rowena thanks her.
As they walk together, Lady Morris begins to share gossip regarding the news of Rowena's arrival. Lady Morris claims the entire capital is talking about Rowena's attendance, leaving the young woman completely bewildered.
Rowena is surprised by how quickly rumors travel, considering she has only just arrived at the palace.
Lady Morris remarks on the boredom of capital residents and their insatiable appetite for finding social gossip.
Lady Morris advises Rowena to be careful because the capital's nobility can be extremely judgmental and harsh.
Rowena listens with growing concern as Lady Morris begins describing the nature of the nobles of Astesian. Lady Morris explains that the local nobility are particularly harsh to people exactly like Rowena.
Claude's spirit watches suspiciously as Lady Morris continues her cryptic warnings about the people of Astesian.
Rowena is shocked by the implication of Lady Morris's words and questions her own perceived beauty.
Lady Morris warns that Rowena's humility might only serve to fuel more envy and jealousy among the nobility.
Upon entering the palace, Lady Morris offers a polite wish for Rowena to enjoy the upcoming ceremony.
Claude remains wary, noting that these coming-of-age ceremonies often lead to various unexpected and problematic incidents.
Claude's gaze narrows as he reflects on the name of the woman who just escorted his companion.
Claude anticipates that the connection to the Sherman family will lead to exciting developments later tonight.
Rowena disagrees with the sentiment, finding potential social incidents to be more distressing than they are exciting.
Lady Morris laughs and expresses her disappointment that Rowena does not share her particular taste for drama.
Lady Morris politely concludes her escort duty and bids Rowena a pleasant coming-of-age ceremony.
Claude expresses his displeasure with the encounter, while Rowena remains thoughtful about their escort's strange behavior.
The scene shifts to the grand ballroom doors as the debutante event officially begins to unfold. Heralds announce the official entrance of Lady Rowena Blooming as she steps into the crowded ballroom for her debut.
Noble guests whisper behind their fans as Rowena passes through the imperial ballroom.
More ladies hide their faces while gossiping intensely about the newly arrived debutante.
Rowena stands alone in the corridor, feeling the heavy weight of social judgment.
Rowena looks on with concern as a nameplate introduces Lady Siona of House Grant.
Siona Grant, the friendly daughter of Viscount House Grant, is formally introduced into the narrative.
Rowena introduces herself as Rowena of House Blooming while Siona offers a polite greeting.
Siona asks if Rowena finds such events difficult, and Rowena credits Siona for the help.
Siona mentions she first noticed Rowena from afar during the prince's recent birthday celebration.
Siona expresses her honor in speaking personally, while Rowena warmly returns the kind sentiment. Claude's spectral form suddenly appears and calls out to Rowena, startling her mid-conversation.
Rowena's eyes widen in shock as she hears the voice of her unseen guardian.
Rowena asks Lady Siona to excuse her for a moment to attend to an urgent matter.
Walking down a quiet hallway, Rowena asks Claude if it is safe to wander about.
Claude suggests using the powder room as an excuse, and Rowena questions their sudden departure.
Claude explains he sensed something wrong in the waiting chamber, leaving Rowena feeling quite confused.
Rowena questions how he would know such things since he rarely attends high society ceremonies. Claude claims an acquaintance informed him, while Rowena remains skeptical of his vague explanation.
Claude advises Rowena to return to the waiting chamber before the grand ceremony officially begins.
Rowena refuses to hide for an hour and asks if there's a better place.
Claude pauses to consider her request while his spectral eyes search the palace halls.
Claude reveals he knows of a secluded place as a beautiful conservatory appears before them.
Rowena notices the area is strangely deserted and lacks the usual heavy palace guard presence.
Claude explains the place is unmanaged, a forgotten corner of the vast imperial palace grounds.
Claude hints at a secret reason for the neglect, which piqued Rowena's curiosity immediately.
Claude attributes the abandonment to the Emperor's demented superstitions, shocking the young woman.
Claude explains that the Emperor is so paranoid that he even actively persecutes magical practitioners.
Claude reveals the Emperor fears his disgruntled ancestors are unhappy with him holding the throne.
Rowena watches as Claude's spectral hand waves through the air, highlighting the eerie atmosphere.
Rowena remains mesmerized by her surroundings as Claude's spirit continues to drift beside her.
Stepping into the light, Rowena gasps in awe at the hidden beauty of the garden.
The scene reveals a lush garden filled with vibrant flowers under the greenhouse glass.
Claude explains this place once housed the imperial urns containing the ashes of former emperors.
Rowena remarks that the storage space for ashes looks remarkably like a peaceful, blooming garden. Bright red tulips bloom vibrantly in the soil, seemingly untouched by the palace's dark superstitions.
Claude explains the remains were left here because they became inextricably mixed with the soil.
Rowena sits down and wonders why such a beautiful place was left completely unattended.
Claude notes the Emperor still believes the spirits of his predecessors haunt this specific location.
Claude asks if she feels any fear, but Rowena simply laughs at the ghostly notion.
Rowena jokes that she has grown quite accustomed to seeing a ghost all the time.
Rowena beams with joy, declaring that the garden's beauty and mystery are exactly her type. Rowena asks how Claude knew of this place, and he admits to frequenting it often.
Claude remarks that life within the palace walls is far less comfortable than most people imagine.
Claude confesses he always needed a place to hide, surprising Rowena with his vulnerable admission.
Claude is surprised by her reaction, while Rowena reminds him that she is only human.
Claude asks if he may inquire about something, his expression becoming more serious and focused. Claude begins to ask about her late entry into society, but stops mid-sentence with a pause.
Rowena looks up in confusion as a dark, looming presence suddenly interrupts their quiet moment.
A gloved hand suddenly grabs Rowena's arm, startling her as she is jerked away.
The mysterious figure shoves Rowena forcefully while she frantically yells for them to wait.
Rowena demandingly asks the identity of her attacker as they loom over her menacingly.
Enoch Claude signals for silence with a finger to his lips while watching nearby. Rowena Blooming gasps in shock, her eyes wide as she questions the sudden situation. Rowena attempts to speak, her hand resting against her ruffled pink gown in confusion.
Rowena blushes deeply, realizing that Enoch is standing far too close for her comfort.
A Google search result displays information about a website for reading manga and webtoons.
A romantic illustration depicts a couple surrounded by roses and intricate golden clockwork motifs.
A single brown dress shoe makes a sharp stomping sound against the manicured green lawn. Enoch questions Rowena about the reasons behind her delayed debut into the Imperial Society.
Enoch reacts with sudden alarm as something unexpected catches his attention in the garden.
Enoch grabs a white-gloved hand and asks if someone is coming toward their quiet location.
Rowena calls out to the man's back, asking him to wait for just a moment. Enoch listens closely, noting multiple people are coming and their footsteps are too light for guards. Enoch tells the woman she is standing too close, causing her to react with a surprised gasp. Enoch realizes nobody is coming and wonders if he was mistaken. Rowena asks what is happening.
Rowena explains that there is a different, actual reason for her late debut into high society.
Rowena offers a gentle smile, looking pleased to finally share her family's difficult social history.
Enoch explains that House Blooming is a prince-elector, but they only have their name. Rowena is confused. A narrative bubble explains that the title of Prince-Elector serves as a significant power symbol. Narration confirms House Blooming did everything in their power to maintain their seat as a Prince-Elector. Enoch wonders why she claims they have nothing but their name, recalling the Claude Mansion fire. Rowena reveals her father made a secret deal with the Emperor to keep their seat.
Her father assumed the tasks of other electors, forcing him to remain away from home.
Enoch reacts to the mention of a deal, realizing he never heard about this secret arrangement.
Enoch reflects that despite his closeness to the Emperor, he is hearing about this for the first time.
Rowena explains that as the only heir, she had to manage the entire estate alone.
While her father was away on business, Rowena spent her days handling estate matters. She confirms that these family responsibilities were the primary cause of her late debut.
Enoch realizes that something is deeply wrong regarding the information Rowena's father provided her.
When House Claude returned to power, there was no mention of House Blooming's extra burdens.
Narration explains the Duke was not a loyalist and was never in the inner circle of meetings. Enoch wonders if the Duke has been lying to Rowena about the Prince-Elector's business this whole time.
Rowena calls out to Lord Claude as he stands frozen in a moment of deep contemplation. Rowena suggests returning to the ballroom since it is already time for the ceremony to start. The pair walks together through the garden toward the grand ballroom for the night's ceremony.
Enoch resolves to investigate the Duke's potential lies more thoroughly after the night's events end.
They discuss splitting up at the ballroom so Enoch can observe the guards' behavior during the ceremony. Enoch notes that whoever is behind the happening will surely signal the guards if it is important. Enoch plans to possess someone to stop the event or return straight to Rowena if necessary.
Rowena walks ahead toward the ballroom doors while Enoch stays behind to begin his investigation.
Enoch turns his head back toward the hallway to begin tracking the behavior of guards.
Enoch looks down as he notices a small, dark object lying on the patterned floor.
A close-up shows Enoch staring at the object on the floor with a shocked expression.
Enoch recognizes the familiar object and glances toward the shadows of the nearby Imperial Hall.
Enoch flinches, sweat dripping down his face as he senses a dark presence nearby. A strawberry crepe lies on the floor as Enoch hears footsteps and a mysterious voice nearby.
The mysterious voice asks Enoch if he likes it while he stands frozen in the palace corridor.
Enoch breaks into a cold sweat as the mysterious presence asks, "Right?" from the shadows.
Enoch turns his head to see a young boy watching him from the dimly lit doormark.
The young, dark-haired boy smiles cheerfully at Enoch and speaks his full name aloud. Shocked and horrified, Enoch asks the strange child who he is while standing frozen.
Enoch reveals his identity and asks if Claude forgot the mansion fire.
Enoch mocks Claude's choice to forget the past to keep his peace.
Claude is visibly disturbed and questions his own desire to suppress his memories.
Enoch highlights the ruthless choices Claude made to achieve his personal goals.
Enoch asserts that Claude no longer remembers any of those dark past actions.
Enoch challenges Claude to remember the day of the fire and a specific gift.
A vision of the fire shows a ring and Claude's struggle to recall.
Claude questions his memory as he fails to identify the gift's purpose.
Claude exhibits intense distress as he remains unable to recall the crucial memory.
A dramatic visual confirms the gift was a ring held in a hand.
Claude stumbles as Enoch mocks his failure to recall his mother's final gift.
Enoch calls Claude a reprobate for forgetting the most important item from his past.
Enoch questions Claude's worth while Rowena stands alone in the palace hallway. Enoch claims Claude never possessed a true interest in avenging his fallen family.
Enoch accuses Claude of using revenge as an ego boost. Claude desperately denies it.
A magical explosion interrupts the confrontation, sending Claude flying backward amidst butterflies. A mysterious figure mocks Claude's pathetic state from within a swirl of magical energy. A mage appears and mockingly greets Master Claude while observing the scene.
The mage expresses surprise at seeing Claude in such a lowly, crawling condition.
The mage stands tall amidst swirling magic and vibrant, dark-colored butterflies. Claude reacts with shock to the sudden arrival of the unexpected magical visitor.
The mage questions the source of Claude's intense bitterness during their meeting.
The mage notes an entity attached to Claude while a child stands nearby.
The mage realizes the situation will be more difficult than he initially expected.
The mage snaps his fingers to activate a spell within the palace grounds.
Swirling magical energy begins to consume the young boy as Claude watches. The mage stands confidently in the hallway as the magical aura expands.
The mage casually dismisses the situation with a cold and mocking finality.
Claude asks what the mage did while the mage questions Claude's own state.
The mage asks how Claude ended up with an entity attached to him.
Claude is puzzled by the mage's inquiry regarding the thing stuck to him.
The mage identifies the mysterious entity attached to Claude as a powerful curse.
The mage explains the curse is a high-level, spite-filled magical spell.
The mage notes the curse's permanence even after Claude has already died.
Claude is completely stunned by the mage's revelation about his own death.
The mage suggests Claude think carefully about his current existence as a specter.
Claude reflects on his spectral form and the meaning of his recent reversion.
The mage confirms that Claude died in his original timeline before returning.
Claude asks how the mage knows about their secret journey back in time.
The mage decides to share an important warning about their current reality. The mage warns that reality may differ from what Claude remembers.
Claude realizes he had always intended to keep his mother's ring close.
Claude reflects on the disturbing fact that he only regained this memory now. Claude's mind returns to the trauma of his father's death and the fire.
Claude describes his daily struggle to preserve his anger for the sake of revenge.
Claude laments that he even forgot the precious gift his mother left him.
Claude concludes that he may no longer have the right to seek vengeance. The mage tells Claude to postpone his emotions and focus on the memories.
The mage links the curse to Claude's fragmented and selective memory state.
A vision reveals a young girl named Stella clinging to a boy's sleeve.
The young brown-haired girl gazes curiously as she softly whispers the names Stella and Claude.
The mage confirms the situation, expressing satisfaction in successfully releasing the powerful and restrictive curse.
A dark, mystical butterfly flutters gracefully through a shimmering trail of stardust and pink light.
A heavy boot steps forward as a voice claims someone prevents his sister's long-awaited reunion.
Within a lavish chamber, a brown-haired man leans in to whisper a secret message.
The silver-haired woman questions their absence before the ceremony, while the man confirms her suspicions.
Grinning maliciously, the silver-haired woman reflects on Lady Blooming's absence and her cousin's concerning disappearance.
The man acknowledges the deviation from their original plan but agrees to proceed as discussed.
A sinister smile plays across the silver-haired woman's face as her dark schemes take root.
Claude questions if the revelation means his sister is still alive, his expression filled with uncertainty.
The mage denies being omniscient, advising Claude to take his own time searching for her. Turning his gaze back to Claude, the mage prepares to address the specter's next steps.
Claude questions the mage's motives for helping him, recalling their long-standing and bitter mutual grudge.
The mage wears a chilling smile while confessing that he still harbors a deep hatred. The mysterious mage walks away across the tiled hallway, leaving Claude to process their intense exchange.
A close-up of the mage reveals a complex, unreadable expression as he prepares to depart.
Claude suddenly remembers the impending ceremony, questioning if the mage should remain in such danger.
Claude watches the mage's retreating figure as he makes a quiet exit through the palace.
Claude stares off with a troubled look, quietly acknowledging the weight of the mage's cryptic words.
The mage explains that Claude can interfere with reality only because he is already truly dead.
Claude begins to run through the hallway, frantic at the realization that he wasted precious time.
Claude prioritizes saving Howard and Rowena over his memories, rushing toward the palace's grand ceremony room. Desperation fills Claude as he prays he isn't too late to intervene in the coming events.
Claude ducks behind a corner, concealing his presence as he keeps a sharp eye on surroundings.
Sensing something nearby, Claude quickly turns his head to scan the corridor for any potential threats.
Rowena sits alone in a chair, looking dejected until a familiar voice suddenly calls her name.
Claude apologizes for his late arrival, but Rowena dismisses his excuse and calls him a liar.
Claude looks visibly wounded by Rowena's cold rejection as he tries to explain his sudden absence.
Rowena keeps her back turned to Claude, refusing to look at him during their tense confrontation. Rowena nervously rubs her reddened wrists, revealing the physical evidence of her recent and forceful struggle. Claude gazes at Rowena with profound worry, noticing her distress and the injuries on her arms.
Rowena looks away with a pained expression, struggling to maintain her composure in front of Claude. Rowena blames herself for the situation while Claude watches her with a deeply sympathetic, silent gaze.
A narrative bubble suggests that certain events should have never been mentioned in the first place.
Claude's expression softens into one of deep regret as he listens to Rowena's heart-wrenching emotional outburst.
Rowena lashes out, accusing Claude of playing with her feelings and offering her only false hope. Rowena continues her regretful monologue, wishing she had remained silent about the original timeline of events. Despite her anger, Rowena's thoughts drift back to Claude as she wonders if he is safe.
Rowena recalls a warning that Howard will disappear from public view immediately following the grand ceremony.
Rowena resolves to stay alert herself as a palace guard ushers her toward the ballroom doors.
A look of surprise crosses Rowena's face as she is greeted by someone in the hallway.
Howard appears with a red-haired lady waving cheerfully to Rowena as they approach the ballroom entrance. Rowena apologizes for being late while Howard reassures her that the official ceremony hasn't started yet.
Howard and Rowena share a close moment as they prepare to make their entrance together.
A palace servant formally announces that the highly anticipated coming-of-age ceremony is about to begin.
The crowd of young noble ladies gazes in awe at the grandeur of the opening event.
Howard offers Rowena his arm and cheerfully asks if she is ready to enter the ballroom.
The servant leads the first debutante through the doors as the grand ceremony officially gets underway.
Rowena wears a look of intense anxiety, her mind still preoccupied with the warnings Claude provided.
Grand chandeliers illuminate the ballroom as lively music begins to echo through the palace's ornate halls.
A narrative transition notes the prompt arrival of the ceremony's long-awaited opening chapter.
Festive music fills the palace halls as the grand coming-of-age ceremony officially begins.
A palace servant formally announces the entrance of His Royal Highness Howard Lawrence to the room. Rowena lowers her head, looking pensive as she focuses on the weight of her upcoming duties.
Howard and Rowena make a grand entrance together, surrounded by vibrant flowers and a festive atmosphere.
The pair walks into the ballroom as Rowena maintains a grateful and composed posture. Rowena offers a faint, gentle smile, though her eyes reflect a lingering sense of inner anxiety.
The Master of Ceremonies officially presents the Emperor and Princess Flora to the gathered noble guests.
Claude leans in to advise Rowena, suggesting she maintain a calm and steady focus for now.
Rowena reflects on Claude's promise to support her through any upcoming challenges, regardless of the cost.
A servant leans in to whisper a secret and urgent message directly to the Emperor.
The Emperor reacts with visible confusion and shock to the alarming news he was just told.
The Emperor claps his hands together, effectively silencing the murmurs of the curious and startled crowd.
Addressing the ballroom, the Emperor announces that a shameful event has just taken place within the palace.
A palace guard's gloved hand reaches out to firmly shut the ballroom's main exit doors.
The Emperor promises leniency if the culprit confesses immediately while the guards secure the hall.
Rowena stares ahead with a look of grim determination, realizing the anticipated confrontation has officially begun.
Rowena steals a quick, anxious glance toward the side, sensing the mounting tension in the room.
Rowena worries that the spectral entity has yet to possess one of the palace guards as intended.
Feeling the pressure, Rowena concludes that the time provided for a voluntary confession has officially ended.
The Emperor sternly commands his guards to bring in the discovered evidence for everyone to see.
A guard steps forward with a disciplined stride, approaching the Emperor with a serious expression.
Rowena reacts with profound shock as the guard reveals her father's distinctive and ornate dagger.
A dramatic splash of blood heightens the tension surrounding the discovery of the incriminating weapon.
Stunned, Rowena recognizes the dagger as the precious gift her father had once left for her.
Rowena clearly recalls leaving the weapon safely inside a box on her bedroom table earlier today.
Claude watches the unfolding drama in silence, his expression unreadable as he observes the palace guards.
The Emperor questions the guard, who claims he witnessed a lady dropping the blade earlier.
The guard prepares to identify the woman he saw discarding the incriminating weapon in the hallway.
Pointing directly at her, the guard identifies Rowena Blooming as the lady who dropped the dagger.
A wave of shocked whispers fills the ballroom as all eyes turn toward the accused, Rowena.
Rowena gasps in protest, desperately trying to interject and clear her name of the guard's accusations.
Reaching out toward the Emperor, Rowena pleads for a chance to explain her side of the story.
Claude steps in, informing the Emperor he has a private matter to disclose regarding the current situation.
A close-up of the man's face reveals a subtle and highly calculated smile.
Rowena accuses Claude of prioritizing his own return to the past over Howard's safety and well-being.
Rowena asserts that Claude's only reason for helping her was to further his own selfish purposes.
A spectral foot steps forward, signaling a shift in the current location or narrative timeline.
Claude softly calls out Rowena's name, his voice echoing through the quiet and tense palace hallway.
Claude offers a sincere and deep apology to Rowena, looking down with a heavy, regretful expression.
Claude insists that he truly wanted to provide genuine assistance to her despite the circumstances.
Claude kneels before the seated Rowena, his spectral form demonstrating a deep gesture of humble submission.
Claude vows to do everything in his power to rectify the situation and make amends.
Rowena remains silent as she processes Claude's desperate plea for trust and his latest hollow promises.
Rowena reports that Howard has already been taken to the interrogation chambers along with Princess Flora.
A transparent foot steps forward, marking a shift in focus to the palace's hidden inner rooms.
Claude explains that he was instructed to wait until the current matter was fully under control.
Flora describes the interrogation chambers as her own private, untouchable sanctuary as she leads Howard inside.
Flora emphasizes that even the guards are strictly prohibited from entering or even knocking on these doors.
The heavy chamber doors swing shut, locking the characters away in a secret space. A heavy wooden door slams shut, sealing the characters inside the interrogation chamber.
Claude realizes the sealing of the doors marks a dangerous point of no return.
Claude notes that only Princess Flora and Howard remain sequestered within the chamber.
Claude concludes he must possess someone to interfere with the events unfolding inside.
Howard remains silent, his golden eyes fixed on his cousin during the tense encounter. Howard asks the silver-haired princess why she brought him to this private sanctuary.
Flora questions Howard about his motivations for protecting Rowena during the public accusation. Flora reminds Howard that bringing a weapon into the palace is an act of treason.
Howard listens as Flora expresses her desire to learn the truth behind his actions.
Howard asserts that Rowena never brought the gifted weapon to the palace at all.
Howard explains he ordered a hunting dagger for Rowena at Lord Blooming's specific request.
Howard produces a document revealing that someone else ordered a copy of the dagger. Howard's research reveals that a palace servant was the one who placed the order.
Flora asks Howard if he truly believes he knows every person in the palace. Flora demands that Howard stop stalling and reveal his true thoughts on the matter.
Howard bluntly accuses Flora of orchestrating the entire plot that unfolded earlier that day. Flora reveals she used Rowena as bait to remove Howard after failing other methods.
Flora sneers, telling Howard he will never see the light of day from now on.
Howard asks Flora if she is truly prepared for the consequences of such a conspiracy.
Howard reminds Flora of his capabilities, questioning if she truly possesses the original order slip.
Flora snarls that she will drag Howard down with her before seeing a dungeon. Howard suggests they move past the threats and negotiate a mutually beneficial deal instead.
Flora laughs, mockingly agreeing that an enticing offer might be worth her consideration.
Howard expresses interest, asking the princess to elaborate on her proposed terms for a deal.
Flora offers to free both Howard and Rowena if the order slip remains a secret.
Flora's expression turns cold as she prepares to state her final condition for their freedom.
Howard asks what Flora expects him to do in exchange for their safe release. Flora mumbles about a future task that she is not yet ready to disclose. Flora states that Howard must perform an undisclosed action for her at a later time.
Howard reacts with confusion, questioning the sudden and cryptic nature of the princess's demand.
Flora advises Howard to return to the ballroom to survive the ceremony without a scratch.
Howard is urged to hurry back before the princess changes her mind about the deal.
Howard turns away, admitting he has no idea what his cousin is truly plotting.
Flora stands alone, her face shadowed as she reflects on the success of her manipulation. Flora anticipates a servant will encounter Howard as he makes his way out alone. Flora watches Howard walk away, knowing he will reach Rowena within a few minutes.
Flora resolves to pass on her instructions and follow Howard to the next location.
Flora observes the prince's departure from the doorway with a look of cold calculation. Flora whispers that they will handle the prince at the next available opportunity.
A servant confirms their understanding of Flora's commands as they stand behind her.
Flora stands alone in the vast hallway, the weight of her schemes filling the space. Flora's gaze narrows as she acknowledges that the real problems are only just beginning. Flora walks through the palace, hoping her timing is perfect for the next phase. Rowena looks startled as she hears the sound of the door opening in her room. Howard appears among yellow flowers, greeting Rowena with a soft and reassuring smile.
Rowena reacts with visible relief, her eyes brightening at the sight of Howard's safe return.
Howard apologizes for worrying Rowena while she dismisses it and asks about the meeting.
Rowena asks if Howard is okay and what the princess had to say that time.
Howard hesitates, looking downward as he prepares to speak about the mysterious princess.
Flora suddenly enters the room, calling out to the pair with a cold presence.
Flora mentions dozing off and admits she cannot clearly remember the events that just occurred.
Howard asks what he told her earlier, prompting a lighthearted laugh from the silver-haired princess.
Howard suggests she had too much wine as Flora formally addresses him as His Highness.
The princess reacts with confusion to the man's suggestion regarding her state of mind.
Howard notes that a specific worry seems to be weighing heavily on the princess's mind.
Howard offers to provide evidence during the upcoming hunting tourney if she remains curious. Howard claims to be fully aware that she despises the Emperor as much as he does.
Howard expresses a preference for her company and wishes to maintain their mutually beneficial exchange.
Howard asks if they previously discussed these matters while Flora remains silent and contemplative.
Standing in the grand hall, Howard calls out to the princess to gain her attention.
A servant whispers to Flora about restarting the ceremony and asks about handling the guard.
Flora smiles and whispers back, ordering the servant to handle the guard as soon as possible.
Flora addresses the group, claiming a misunderstanding occurred between the palace guard and the lady.
Flora suggests heading to the ballroom to clear the situation, and Rowena respectfully agrees. The trio walks down the expansive palace hallway toward the main event of the evening.
Rowena wonders if Claude solved the problem and if he knows the Emperor's private secrets.
A close-up highlights Rowena's expressive blue eyes as she reflects on the recent startling events.
Rowena observes Howard, concluding he is a far more formidable person than she had initially imagined.
A partial view of Flora's face shows her wearing a subtle, knowing smile.
The grand hall stands empty as Flora prepares to address the guests regarding the situation.
The group finally arrives at the ballroom doors as they prepare to enter the party.
Howard, Flora, and Rowena enter the crowded ballroom as the guests turn their attention toward them.
Stepping forward, Flora thanks the gathered noble guests for their patience during the unexpected delay.
Flora announces the guard fabricated the entire weapon smuggling incident, sparking a wave of shocked whispers.
Flora declares the guard will be punished, and she personally escorted Rowena to clear her name.
As Crown Princess, Flora apologizes for the palace's failure to properly supervise its own personnel.
The Emperor raises his hand to silence the room as he prepares to address the crowd.
Speaking as ruler, the Emperor offers a heartfelt apology to all the guests in attendance. The Emperor laments that a joyful banquet was spoiled by the bad intentions of a single individual. The Emperor promises to prevent future incidents and invites everyone to enjoy the rest of the banquet. Onlookers comment on the king's piety and benevolence as he walks away with his servant. A red-haired lady listens to the praise for the Emperor but internally questions his supposed admirable nature. Guests whisper that the Grand Duke likely cleared Rowena's name as Howard and Flora walked by.
The red-haired woman gazes toward Rowena with a look of genuine pity and concern.
The lady notes Rowena's suffering at the hands of malicious people while Rowena remains quiet.
Rowena breathes a sigh of relief, glad the immediate problem has been resolved for the moment.
Rowena ponders Claude's secret trade until his spectral voice asks if she is truly curious. Startled, Rowena reacts as Claude appears to have read her private thoughts with supernatural ease.
Claude confirms he figured out her thoughts while standing calmly in the brightly lit palace.
Claude warns Rowena to stay silent and listen carefully as others may still be watching her.
Claude assures Rowena that something helpful will turn up by the time of the schedule talk.
Claude notes their narrow escape was achieved through the typical bartering and trading of valuable information. Claude advises Rowena to prioritize avoiding immediate danger and to keep a close watch on her surroundings.
Howard reflects on how Rowena is now walking free due to the specific actions he took.
Howard considers his own strength and notes even the Emperor finds him difficult to manage.
Standing with the red-haired lady, Howard acknowledges that he successfully escaped a difficult pinch today.
Howard resolves to make his own thorough preparations for whatever challenges may arise the next time.
Rowena admits the ordeal was confusing but expresses gladness that neither of her friends was harmed.
Rowena apologizes for causing concern and believes things are fine now that the misunderstanding has cleared.
Howard warns Rowena that the situation isn't over yet as the guard might have other plans.
Howard warns Rowena and Siona not to eat any food served and tells them to merely pretend to eat.
Howard addresses the red-haired lady Siona, advising her to be cautious due to the uncertain and potentially dangerous palace atmosphere.
Rowena looks toward Siona, feeling exhausted by their ordeal and frustrated that the tense situation has yet to conclude.
Rowena reflects on the lack of enjoyment at the party after their recent narrow escape while music notes drift by. A close-up focus highlights a red teardrop gemstone earring, a detailed accessory worn by the blonde woman. Rowena, Siona, and Howard walk down the long palace corridor as Rowena hopes the evening ends quickly.
The grand banquet hall of the palace is shown from a distance, filled with empty tables and ornate gold decorations.
Flora stands in the silent hallway, her back to the group as she processes her recent interactions with Howard.
Flora reflects on the specific concerns weighing on Howard's mind, suspecting he is hiding deeper secrets from her.
Howard offers to provide evidence regarding the Emperor during the hunting tourney if the princess remains interested.
Flora taps her foot in annoyance, internally cursing Howard as a manipulative snake for attempting to strike a deal.
Flora resolves to imprison Howard and Rowena if Howard is bluffing, while the prince stands nearby with his back turned.
A black-haired man arrives, surprised to find Flora still there, prompting a look of irritation from the silver-haired princess.
Flora criticizes the newcomer for his habitual lateness to important events, her eyes conveying her sharp and impatient mood.
The black-haired man, identified as Enoch Claude, smiles calmly as he faces the princess in the palace hallway.
Enoch Claude claims he only came to the palace at Flora's request, despite his original plan to see the Emperor.
Flora whispers a harsh blame toward Enoch Claude, stating Howard escaped because Claude arrived far too late for her. Flora questions why Claude changed his mind and released Howard, demanding to know what information Howard might have shared.
Enoch Claude offers to reveal the details of the encounter if Flora agrees to be his partner for the banquet. Claude notes that Flora always attempts to keep him close during official events, recognizing her patterns of social manipulation.
Claude internally admits he would prefer Rowena's company over Flora's, whom he considers to be a vicious and unpleasant person.
Claude agrees to Flora's terms, figuring that her affection for him allows him a certain level of freedom within her schemes. Claude mentions his heavy workload as a reason for potential lateness, while Flora acknowledges the rising status of his noble house.
Claude observes the immediate shift in Flora's attitude once her wish was granted, reflecting on the foolishness people display in love.
Flora ponders the possibility that Howard discovered vital information about her father, though she remains uncertain about the specifics.
Claude confirms his plan to investigate Howard's information during the hunting tourney, while Flora listens with a skeptical expression.
Claude concludes that letting Howard go is wise if the information could sabotage the Emperor, though he suspects Flora's motivations.
Flora admits that a portion of her memory seems missing, feeling as though she fell asleep during the previous encounter. Flora confirms she managed to strike the bargain despite her memory lapse, while Claude responds with a dismissive laugh.
Claude suggests that Flora may have simply indulged in too much wine the previous night as he leans toward her.
Flora pauses as her suspicions grow just before she is addressed by a guard from further down the hallway. Claude checks the time and decides he must leave, signaling an end to their manipulative conversation in the hall.
Claude bids Flora a casual farewell as he heads off to see the Emperor, leaving the princess standing alone.
Flora lets out a small laugh, her expression turning sharp as she begins to question the motives of those around her.
Flora wonders why Howard and Claude used similar phrasing, suspecting a conspiracy is being plotted behind her back.
A close-up of Flora shows her narrowing her eyes as she speaks the name of her supposed ally, Enoch Claude.
Claude walks away with a confident stride, his back to the princess as he continues through the palace halls.
Flora stands in place, letting out a small laugh that hides her growing unease regarding the evening's events.
A man with long silver hair speaks from the shadows, noting that he came by just in case something happened.
The silver-haired man grins with red eyes, finding the unfolding situation far more entertaining than he had initially anticipated. Under a starry sky, a horse-drawn carriage rattles through the paved streets as the guests depart from the palace.
Rowena sits inside the carriage, gazing out the window as she reflects on the chaos and tension of the banquet.
Mary, Rowena's companion, offers a sincere apology for failing to arrive in time to assist during the earlier accusation. Mary explains she was delayed by an unexpected encounter while attempting to reach the palace guards to help Rowena. Rowena expresses relief that everything was resolved and asks Mary for the story about her encounter with a mysterious mage.
Rowena is startled to learn Mary saw a mage they met previously, questioning why such a figure was at the palace.
Mary reveals the encounter helped her realize her memories have been altered, causing her to fidget with visible distress.
A mysterious message confirms that Mary has traveled from the future, specifically from a time 4 years ahead.
Mary explains that while her future knowledge is useful, she recently realized she has forgotten things that are truly vital. In a shocking revelation, Mary admits to Rowena that she had completely forgotten about the existence of her own sister.
Mary mentions she didn't remember her sister until a mage told her, despite his knowledge.
Rowena finds it odd that someone would completely forget their own family members like that.
A single finger points upward against a dark, luminous backdrop to emphasize a critical observation.
Margrave Enoch looks shocked and confused as he learns some unexpected information during the palace banquet. Rowena suggests that some external cause might explain why Mary's memories were also lost.
Mary recalls Rowena's story about seeing a child at the manor of her father's friend. Rowena realizes with shock that the child she saw in the past might have been Stella.
Mary states she has no memory of visiting Claude Manor, otherwise she would have met Rowena.
Mary reflects on the fact that she has no recollection of the events Rowena just described.
Mary asks Rowena if she knows anything about the fire that destroyed the Claude family manor. A grand estate is shown engulfed in a massive fire, illustrating the tragedy Mary just mentioned. Rowena admits she never heard of the fire, perhaps because her family estate is so isolated. Mary mentions she has a favor to ask of Rowena as their carriage travels through Tom.
Mary reveals that there is something she needs to investigate further regarding the past incidents.
Rowena asks for more details about the specific thing that Mary wishes to investigate now.
Mary theorizes that if Rowena were actually at Claude Manor on the day she saw the child,
A man's leg is seen walking past the gravestone of Jake Claude in a quiet cemetery. Mary asks Rowena to question her father about what happened the day the Claude Manor burned.
Howard notes that Duke Blooming would likely have information about the incident since he was involved.
A servant informs Howard that it is time for them to return home to their escape.
Howard acknowledges the servant's reminder, but indicates he has one more question before they leave.
Howard asks if there has been any success in finding the body of Jake Claude yet.
The servant reports that Margrave Enoch has been searching tirelessly but has found nothing so far.
Howard expresses a deep wish that the person in question could somehow still be found alive.
Howard reflects on the situation, admitting that it is highly unlikely the individual managed to survive.
A dark panel with bloodstains emphasizes the grim idea that enemies are never kept alive.
Rowena is surprised by the request and asks why she should ask her father specifically.
Rowena doubts her father knows much, but Mary believes he definitely has some information to share.
Mary is certain that Rowena's father, Duke Blooming, knows something about the fire at the manor. Mary mentions rumors of Rowena's father and the Emperor meeting secretly on the day of the fire.
Mary internally decides to be more careful about what she reveals to Rowena during their conversation.
Mary explains she only learned this after being reinstated as a prince-elector like her ancestors.
Mary suggests Rowena's father might know about the incident if their secret meeting was significant.
Mary is surprised to learn Rowena's manor burned down and asks for more details about it.
Rowena confirms she lost her parents in a fire and barely survived the ordeal with burns.
Rowena apologizes for asking about such painful memories, while Mary assures her it was long ago.
Mary reflects on her desire to find her sister and the fall of her noble house.
Mary describes the struggle to rebuild House Claude and regain her family's title as Margrave.
Margrave Enoch states that he has other priorities now that his circumstances have changed significantly.
Mary assumes their memories of Stella were manipulated after she was sent back to the past.
Mary questions why Stella was removed from their memories while a room burns in the background.
Mary realizes that Duke Blooming might be the only person alive who knows the truth about Stella.
Mary considers that she might be sent back to her own time once her goal is met.
Mary decides to prioritize finding Stella over her revenge once she returns to her original time. A grand stone building stands silently under a starry night sky, partially obscured by green leaves.
Mary reflects on how her quest for vengeance has been her only motivation for many years. Mary is surprised to find herself having to stop her own revenge to focus on Stella.
Margrave Enoch walks through the palace garden, his face set in a neutral expression as he moves.
Enoch turns his head suddenly, appearing to have heard something or sensed a presence in the garden.
A wooden carving on a wall is shown in close-up, revealing its unique and detailed pattern.
Enoch Claude touches a detailed wooden carving on a wall within the palace hallway.
Claude observes the room, noting with a smile that someone else has recently been there. A fading white light signals a transition in the narrative as time passes by.
Several days later, the scene shifts to the grand doors of the Blooming Manor.
Rowena sits alone in a lavishly decorated room, quietly reading her book by the window.
Rowena wonders if her father will return tonight, noting his plan to come back home.
Rowena reflects on her father's frequent travels and her missed opportunity to discuss Claude's request.
Close-up on Rowena's eye as she contemplates the upcoming schedule of the prince-electors.
Narration explains that nobles enjoy hunting, making the imperial hunt a prime social event.
The Imperial Hunt's crest is shown, emphasizing that all debutantes are required to attend.
While hunting the most game brings honor, managing the event is considered a prestigious duty.
The Emperor usually appoints his most trusted prince-elector to host the hunting events. A sudden knock at the door startles Rowena, interrupting her quiet moment of reflection.
A black-haired maid informs Rowena that Lady Siona of House Grant is waiting.
Rowena admits she lost track of time while reading as she prepares to meet Siona.
Tea is poured into a delicate cup, preparing for the meeting between the two noble women.
Rowena and Siona sit together at a table while the maid serves them tea.
Siona greets Rowena, expressing her honor to visit and asking how she has been.
Siona is impressed by the fragrant tea, asking Rowena about the specific blend being served. Rowena explains that the herbal tea is made from unique daffodils grown only in Belfart.
Siona mentions that His Highness is fond of the tea and that Howard sent his wishes.
Siona conveys Howard's well wishes, explaining he will be too busy to visit before the hunt.
Siona begins to whisper, leaning closer to Rowena with a look of growing concern.
Siona asks Rowena if she has received her invitation to the upcoming imperial hunt.
Siona explains that all nobles are invited, while Rowena admits she hasn't opened hers yet.
Siona urges Rowena to check the specific sender of the letter, regardless of the seal.
Rowena looks at the envelope with a confused expression, questioning the identity of the sender.
Rowena is startled to see the name Rachel Edwards written on the back of the envelope.
Rowena questions if Rachel is from the Count Edwards' house, expressing her growing concern.
Siona notes the bad reputation of the Edwards family and the vices of Count Edward's son.
Siona reveals that Lady Rachel is considered to be the close confidant of Princess Flora.
Rowena is shocked by the revelation, while Siona nods in silent confirmation across the table.
Siona warns that the princess might use the hunt to put Grand Duke Lawrence in danger.
A dark image of Grand Duke Lawrence appears, surrounded by chains and bloodstains.
A blood splatter against a dark background emphasizes the potential danger mentioned by Siona.
The scene shifts to a grand, empty corridor with polished marble floors and large windows. A pair of feet in black shoes walks purposefully across the patterned stone floor. Rachel Edwards stands in a hallway, clutching a letter as she prepares for an audience. Rachel knocks on the ornate door, seeking entrance to speak with the princess.
Rachel enters the room and bows, excusing her sudden visit to Her Highness.
Princess Flora asks if the matter is urgent since Rachel came to see her in person. Rachel presents a letter of recommendation from a mage for the academy Flora manages.
Flora notes it has been a long time since she received a mage's recommendation letter.
Close-up of Flora as she begins to read the letter from a mage named Rudolus.
The mage introduces himself as an old, humble worker living in a small, distant village. Rudolus mentions taking a talented girl under his care despite the Empire's current views.
The letter hopes Flora will accept the girl so she can serve the Empire's shadows.
Flora reacts with surprise after reading the name Rudolus at the bottom of the letter.
Flora smiles as she mentions having heard about this individual before.
I've heard. Narrative text introduces Rudolus, the Imperial family's legendary Grand Mage and the Empire's most talented.
The white-haired princess schemes to recruit the Grand Mage who poses a threat to her father. The princess orders Lady Rachel to contact the mage and settle matters in his favor immediately. The princess asks for a progress report regarding the preparations for the upcoming Imperial hunting tournament. Lady Rachel confirms she is meticulously overseeing every detail to ensure the event's success for Her Highness.
Placing a hand on the desk, the princess expresses her complete confidence in Lady Rachel's faithful service.
The princess delivers a stern warning for Lady Rachel to fulfill every specific request she has made. Lady Rachel looks apprehensive as she is told she will only receive one single opportunity to succeed. A close-up shows Lady Rachel's mouth as she solemnly promises Her Highness she is not forgotten. The princess notes that hunting tournaments often provide perfect opportunities for mysterious and fatal accidents to occur.
A fork aggressively plunges into a chocolate cake, emphasizing the princess's violent and calculated hidden intent. A sudden blurred motion across the scene signifies the initiation of a dangerous and clandestine plot.
The princess smiles and asks for confirmation that hunting tournaments frequently result in very unfortunate accidents. Narration warns that accidents don't discriminate, looming over the silent, grand halls of the Imperial Palace.
The narrator suggests an accident could easily befall someone as important as the Empire's Grand Duke.
The white-haired princess asserts that bad luck can strike anyone at any time, regardless of status.
The princess pointedly asks Lady Rachel for her agreement while the blonde woman sweats under pressure.
Lady Rachel offers a quiet and hesitant confirmation of the princess's dark and threatening rhetorical question.
A flapping sound echoes near a vase of red roses as a single petal falls away.
Lady Rachel gives her final confirmation, vowing to follow Her Highness's command as the scene fades. Dense black scribbles consume the frame, creating an oppressive atmosphere during the story's dark narrative transition.
The red-haired woman realizes the princess likely intends to use the hunting tournament to endanger Lawrence.
The red-haired woman warns Rowena Blooming to be extremely careful since the Duke is in danger.
A servant bows while the red-haired woman notes that anything could happen during the unpredictable tournament. Rowena Blooming sighs deeply, her eyes reflecting the heavy burden of the dangerous secrets she holds.
Rowena fidgets nervously, reflecting on the difficulty of clearing her name since the debutante ball incident.
Rowena Blooming resolves to remain cautious for the time being as she turns to walk away. A close-up reveals Rowena's troubled expression as she continues to navigate the palace's treacherous social environment.
Walking toward the grand doors, Rowena realizes she hasn't seen Lord Claude for some time.
A close-up of a man's face captures his somber expression as he remains lost in thought.
Lord Claude wonders if anything has happened to his absent associate while standing before an old painting.
Lord Claude reflects on how the balls incident has led them into entirely uncharted and dangerous territory.
Narration notes that every scheme involves masterminds and executors while depicting various characters in a montage.
Lord Claude recognizes that he is the tool the princess would most likely use for her bidding.
He recalls that in a previous timeline, he was too busy to attend the Imperial hunting tournament.
Lord Claude realizes that his current situation means he probably won't be at the tournament this year. Looking through a window, Lord Claude acknowledges that his memories of the past are fundamentally flawed. He resolves to consider that events might not unfold exactly the way he remembers them happening before.
Lord Claude sighs and whispers Stella's name while clutching his ornate, diamond-encrusted silver neck jewel. He wonders if Stella vanished during the fire since he has no recollection of her being there.
A view of gravestones serves as a reminder of the many servants who died during the fire.
Lord Claude reflects on his lucky survival, which was only possible because a servant rescued him.
A flashback depicts a servant with a bucket rushing to save a young boy from the flames.
Lord Claude tries to recall the name of the servant who found him and saved his life.
The face of the servant in the burning mansion remains obscured by hazy shadows and fading memories.
Lord Claude gasps as a sudden, startling realization about the identity of his rescuer crosses his mind.
Fallen leaves flutter in the breeze as he begins to see the hidden truth behind his memories. An overlay of Lord Claude's face appears as he realizes a vital and shocking connection to the past. The clock tower stands at sunset as Lord Claude decides he must visit a specific location soon. A woman stands outside a large brick building while others enter, marking the start of his journey.
Rachel walks through the art gallery as Princess Flora observes her from the hallway.
Rachel bows her head and confirms she will obey the princess's latest command. Princess Flora asks Rachel if her younger brother attended the recent debutante banquet. Flora mentions she heard rumors about Rachel's brother causing trouble for other participants. Flora notes that while behavior at home is private, palace etiquette is non-negotiable.
Rachel looks down with a bead of sweat, offering her sincere apologies to Flora.
Flora brings up disturbing stories she has heard regarding Rachel's father in political meetings.
Flora explains that she hears everything the electors say, even when they are absent. Flora hints that there is a specific strategic reason she is tolerating House Edwards. The two women stand in the center of the lavishly decorated imperial chamber.
Flora offers a warm smile and praises Rachel for being a very clever lady.
Flora expresses that she has high expectations for Rachel's future role in her plans.
The princess reaches out to touch Rachel's hands in a gesture of calculated intimacy.
Flora confesses her wish for the outcome to align perfectly with her personal desires.
Flora clarifies that she expects these results during the upcoming imperial hunting journey. Rachel reflects on her father's reputation and her brother's failures while looking troubled.
Rachel acknowledges the princess's mercy, but fears her family may still lose their status.
Rachel resolves to ensure every part of the plan goes exactly as Flora intends.
Clenching her fist, Rachel determines to fix the errors made by her male relatives.
Rachel sits alone on a bench, appearing tiny before a massive, beautiful seaside painting.
Rachel laments that her commoner lineage prevents her from ever leading her noble house.
Rachel values the museum as a rare sanctuary where she can remain entirely anonymous.
Narration reveals that Rachel's true purpose at the hunt is to serve as bait.
Rachel recalls Flora's promise of safety for her family in exchange for her cooperation.
Rachel prepares herself to take any blame necessary to protect those she loves.
Rachel wonders why her house was chosen to officiate despite her brother's public disgrace.
Rachel worries that Goldman's lack of discipline might ruin the princess's carefully laid plans.
Narrative text explains that tradition-rich houses usually officiate, unlike the currently disgraced House Blooming.
Rachel focuses on the memory of a particular Margrave among the ranks of electors.
A sudden knock sounds at the door, which begins to creak open slowly. A dark-haired man in a military uniform walks into the room with purpose.
Enoch Claude stands before the princess, his expression neutral and his posture stiffly formal.
Enoch arrives at Flora's desk as she continues to review her official documents.
Flora mentions she received news that Count Edwards will be officiating the tournament events.
Enoch questions the logic of using Rachel's family given their questionable social standing.
Flora explains that having Rachel herself officiate is the key to solving their problem. Enoch warns that Goldman Edwards is a fool who will inevitably create new complications. Enoch proposes monitoring Howard during the hunt, but Flora tells him to gather information.
Flora turns her head slightly, asking if Enoch is actually volunteering for the mission.
Flora agrees to the plan, but insists Enoch remain entirely hidden and off-record.
Enoch departs from the chamber, leaving Flora alone with her papers and her thoughts.
Flora smiles to herself, appearing pleased with how her chess pieces are moving. Flora moves a piece on the board, wondering what Enoch really wants from lines.
A splash of abstract light and shadow marks a transition in the late evening.
A carriage arrives at the grand estate as evening shadows stretch across the grounds. A servant's gloved hand carries a flickering lantern to light the path for the arrival.
Howard is welcomed home by his staff, who ask if anything noteworthy happened away.
A servant reports that Lady Siona visited the manor earlier in the afternoon. The servant explains that Siona and Rowena have become close friends after meeting recently. Howard looks concerned, noting that House Grant's political ties could put Rowena in danger. Howard notes House Grant's social standing while the servant agrees they have many influential friends. The servant mentions the debutante ball discussion, prompting Howard to resolve to speak with Rowena.
Howard looks determinedly ahead while searching through his belongings for a specific item just in case.
Howard produces a sealed envelope and instructs his servant to deliver it to House Grant.
Howard reflects on the seriousness of the banquet incident and how charges were dropped immediately.
The servant questions if contacting Viscount Grant might appear suspicious under the current social climate.
Howard explains the letter is just a casual inquiry regarding similar occurrences at other social events.
Howard asserts that prince-electors must identify threats to His Majesty, while the servant finds this reasonable.
Howard offers his own carriage for the journey to the capital to ensure a quick arrival.
The servant hesitates to use the house crest alone, but Howard insists it is necessary compensation.
Curtis bows respectfully to Howard and promises to depart for the capital immediately with the letter.
Howard dismisses the remaining staff as night falls, though the gray-haired servant offers to stay. Howard stands alone in the garden, his expression clouded with deep concern and unexpressed thoughts. While walking, Howard contemplates Curtis's unwavering loyalty to the imperial throne throughout his long service.
Howard concludes Curtis cannot be a spy, having served both the previous and current emperors faithfully.
Howard notes they are finally discovering hints about a fateful past event requiring absolute precaution.
Howard stands in the courtyard, weighing how much of the truth he should share with Rowena.
Howard recalls how someone framed a lady with a replica dagger and realizes he must warn Rowena.
Clenching his fist, Howard worries that other household servants might be reporting directly to the Emperor.
Howard reflects on Emperor Reuben's suspicious nature and the danger of being overheard by hidden ears.
Howard feels mentally exhausted from his travels, struggling to maintain clear thoughts as he nears home.
Howard seeks a moment of solitude to organize his mind before the inevitable confrontation with Rowena. A solitary lantern sits on the ornate floor, casting a warm glow against the darkening room.
Rowena sits quietly in her chamber until a sudden ethereal breeze sweeps through the still air.
A mysterious wind whips around Rowena, catching her off guard as she sits alone at night.
Rowena stands and walks through the dark palace hallway, her path lit only by a candle.
Startled by a sound from the balcony, Rowena pauses to look toward the large glass doors.
Rowena steps outside and calls out into the night, asking if there is anyone present there.
A pair of bare feet land silently on the stone as Rowena's confusion and fear grow.
Rowena turns quickly toward the interior of the room after sensing a sudden presence behind her.
Rowena's wide eyes reflect the sight of a figure who has appeared mysteriously on her balcony.
Rowena is shocked to find a woman standing there who shares her own face and hair.
Rowena stares in disbelief at her double, stunned by the uncanny resemblance between the two women.
Rowena recalls a past conversation about her mother's disappearance and wonders if this woman is connected.
Rowena approaches the mysterious figure on the balcony, hoping for answers about her family's hidden history.
Rowena tentatively asks the woman if she is Granny Agnes, seeking recognition from the familiar-looking stranger.
Rowena explains that if the woman is who she thinks, she has many urgent questions.
Rowena admits her lost memories and asks the woman how long it took to regain her own.
Rowena wonders if Claude is keeping information from her because the memories are too painful to bear.
Rowena clenches her hands, expressing her desire to regain her past to protect those who helped her.
A sinister voice from the darkness asks Rowena if she truly wants to know the hidden truth.
The mysterious woman steps closer to Rowena, who recoils slightly as the atmosphere turns chillingly cold.
The woman smiles broadly and clarifies that she is not the person Rowena is looking for. The stranger grabs Rowena's chin, looming over her with a menacing grin and questioning her own identity.
The woman whispers about love while wearing a disturbing smile that unsettles the terrified Rowena.
The stranger claims love bloomed in her heart before she even understood the nature of the feeling.
The double leans in close, describing how Rowena's voice and warmth caused her love to bloom. The woman speaks of an everlasting flower as she hovers inches away from Rowena's frightened face.
Rowena gasps in shock as a loud voice suddenly calls out her name from the doorway.
Claude stands in the room, looking surprised to see Rowena still there after the Duke's arrival.
As Rowena stirs from sleep, a voice command directs her to finally wake up.
Seeking comfort, Rowena throws herself into a hug, catching Claude completely off guard.
Rowena breaks down into heavy sobs while holding tightly to Claude in her chamber.
Claude looks down at the crying woman with a deeply conflicted and pained expression.
Gently reaching out, Claude uses his gloved finger to brush away a stray tear.
Claude releases a heavy sigh, appearing emotionally drained by the intensity of the moment.
Pulling back slightly, Claude asks Rowena to explain what has caused her sudden distress. The intricate details of Claude's brooch shimmer as he focuses intently on her answer.
Claude reiterates his concern, pressing Rowena for the details of whatever event upset her.
Stepping away, Rowena explains that she was simply startled by a very vivid nightmare.
Rowena recalls the unsettling image of her own double from the strange dream she had.
Dismissing her previous fear, Rowena jokingly claims she made too much fuss over nothing.
Claude scolds her for the scare, while Rowena insists her genuine terror justified the reaction.
Turning to more practical matters, Rowena asks if her father has returned to the manor.
Claude confirms her father's arrival, noting that he is currently waiting in the mansion's study.
Hearing the news, Rowena quickly picks up her pace to meet with him immediately.
Rowena reaches the study door and delivers a firm knock to announce her arrival.
Peeking through the opening door, Rowena calls out to check if her father is inside.
Rowena's expression shifts to surprise as she finds the room's current state quite unexpected.
Harold, the gray-haired servant, formally greets Rowena and remarks on the time since they spoke.
Harold offers his well wishes while Rowena politely confirms she has been doing well recently.
When Rowena asks about her father's whereabouts, Harold responds with a look of quiet hesitation.
Harold leads the way as Rowena follows him through the quiet hallways of the estate.
Rowena grows increasingly uneasy as strange rattling sounds echo through the passage they are traversing.
A speech bubble indicates that Howard is actually waiting for her in a different location.
Harold kneels on the floor to open a concealed hatch, revealing a hidden underground passage. The pair enters a cold, dusty storage cellar filled with various crates and wooden barrels. Guided by a small lantern, Rowena carefully follows Harold deeper into the dark stone basement.
Rowena expresses her confusion, asking Harold to clarify the nature of this mysterious hidden room.
Harold explains that they are currently moving through a secret underground storage area.
Harold further details that this area serves as a vital secret escape route for emergencies.
Rowena looks around in amazement, admitting she never knew such a place existed beneath home.
Finally reaching their destination, Rowena excitedly calls out to her father as they find him.
Howard thanks Harold for his assistance and instructs the servant to wait in Mafudi.
Claude stands by invisibly, watching the reunion with a suspicious and focused gaze. Narration explains that the secret passage is hidden from the knowledge of almost all servants.
Claude reflects on the discrepancy between the official agenda and this highly secretive meeting.
Claude questions why Howard dismissed the staff and brought Rowena to such a remote spot.
Claude concludes that the extreme secrecy is necessary for a conversation meant for their ears.
Howard apologizes for the unusual setting, explaining the absolute necessity of ensuring they are unheard.
Howard mentions the banquet incident, noting how much it must have startled and upset Rowena.
Howard acknowledges that discussing the details of the incident is the primary purpose of their meeting.
Howard asks if Rowena has concerns regarding the Grand Duke while Claude observes their interaction.
Claude whispers a direct command, telling Rowena to repeat his specific words to her father.
Rowena begins to speak about Howard's involvement, causing her father to ask for clarification.
Rowena explains that the guards found a replica dagger identical to the one Howard gifted her.
Howard listens gravely as Rowena points out the implications of someone planting such a replica.
A flash of abstract light marks a tense shift as the gravity of their situation settles.
Rowena pauses mid-sentence, her expression hardening as she prepares to state a dark realization.
Rowena declares her belief that the true target of the incident was herself, not Howard.
Rowena suggests that House Blooming is being targeted because someone knew about Howard's custom-made dagger.
A narrative caption marks the memory of when Howard was taken in for interrogation.
Howard tells Rowena that he overheard a concerning detail while being escorted by a guard.
Rowena glances at Claude as Howard mentions a manor fire from 10 years ago.
Claude listens intently while Howard repeats the claim that House Blooming must pay the price.
Howard explains his curiosity and desire to understand what truly happened during that time.
Howard questions Rowena to ensure she is absolutely certain the guard made that specific remark.
Rowena confirms the guard's words as Howard turns away, his expression filled with deep concern. Howard releases a long, troubled sigh before deciding how to proceed with his explanation. Howard expresses relief for bringing Rowena to the secluded spot for such a sensitive conversation.
Howard suggests moving deeper into the passage, while Claude wonders if Howard took the bait.
Claude internally admits that he fabricated the entire story regarding the guard's statement about Howard.
Claude observes Howard questioning what secrets he might be hiding with such extreme caution. Howard asks Rowena if he recalls the old friendship between himself and Claude's father.
Claude remains silent as Rowena admits she was too young to remember her father's friend.
Howard is visibly stunned to learn that Rowena has no memory of the major fire.
Howard finds it impossible that she could forget such a significant and life-altering incident.
A dark void emphasizes Howard's explanation that the fire occurred in the dead of night.
Howard reveals the shocking detail that Rowena was the one who woke him that night.
Rowena is completely bewildered, questioning her own lack of memory regarding her father's claim.
Howard stands before Rowena, recounting her specific actions and commands during the manor fire.
Howard begins to reveal the unsettling truth about Rowena's actual state during that night.
Rowena asks for clarification as her father pauses, looking troubled by the memory.
Howard asks Rowena if she has ever mentioned these specific details to anyone other than him.
Rowena confirms that this is the very first time she has ever discussed the matter.
Howard shows visible relief, thankful that Rowena has kept this information entirely to herself.
Howard confirms Rowena's assessment, noting that her concerns about the banquet incident were correct.
Claude reacts with concern as Howard warns that an unknown enemy is targeting their family.
Howard explicitly states that someone is actively trying to bring harm to their entire household.
Rowena is bewildered, questioning why anyone would want to target their family in such a way.
Howard notes House Claude recently regained the Prince Electorship they lost immediately after the fire.
Flashback panels depict the tragic destruction of the Claude Manor and the resulting family casualties.
Howard reveals that J. Claude went missing during the fire, leading to their loss of status.
Howard explains how he rushed to the Claude Manor as fast as he possibly could.
A flashback shows Howard standing helplessly before the massive manor as it is consumed by flames. Howard admits he arrived too late to discover the actual cause of the catastrophic fire.
Claude reflects on how subsequent investigations with the Emperor failed to yield any significant leads.
Rowena concludes that their family had nothing to do with the actual cause of the fire. Howard explains that public assumptions and rumors are why their family is viewed with suspicion. Rowena begins to recall a faint memory as a lantern flickers in the dark storage room.
Howard describes the generational closeness between the Claude family and the imperial throne.
Howard explains that the Emperor asked House Blooming to temporarily take over House Claude's duties. Rowena glances at Claude, processing the implication that they essentially replaced his family's role.
Rowena wonders to herself if Lord Claude is fully aware of all these damaging rumors.
Claude remains silent and focused as Rowena ponders his knowledge of their family's history.
Rowena asks Howard about the specific nature of the role they serve in Claude's place.
Howard turns away, stating he cannot disclose the full details of their mysterious task. Howard hesitates as he tries to find the right words to describe their current mission. Claude reacts with a sharp gasp of shock to a sudden unspoken realization. Claude's thoughts race as he considers the dangerous significance of the imperial family's mark.
Claude considers the sign passed between heirs while noting House Claude's exclusion from its history.
A sudden thought causes Claude to gasp as he realizes a significant hidden possibility.
Claude's gaze intensifies while he reflects on the potential truth behind the Duke's recent explanation.
Howard suggests leaving the cellar as Claude hopes the Imperial mark leads to his sister. Howard leads Rowena back through the dark cellar, noting the late hour of their meeting. Pausing by the stairs, Howard asks Rowena if she has any other questions to ask him.
Howard acknowledges Rowena's curious nature and tells her that he understands how she feels.
Howard insists he cannot disclose more information because the secrets are too dangerous for her. Howard warns of the risks to their family while Rowena apologizes for her reckless curiosity.
Howard comforts Rowena, explaining he shared the secrets to prepare her for potential future involvement.
Howard advises Rowena to be prudent as she enters society now that she is of age.
Howard promises a full explanation later, prompting Rowena to nod in silent agreement and understanding. Back in a well-lit room, Rowena acknowledges her father's words while a single lamp glows.
A close-up shows a sealed letter lying on the floor near the leg of a desk.
Rowena stands in the ornate room while Claude's invisible form remains observant by her side.
Claude watches Rowena with a solemn expression as she processes the weight of their family's history.
Rowena discusses her house taking over his family's role, leading Claude to ask for more details.
Claude reflects on the power shift and acknowledges how uncomfortable the situation must have been. Claude notes his family's restored status and hopes things will return to their former state soon.
Claude expresses doubt about the Duke's honesty, causing a surprised Rowena to ask for clarification.
Claude suggests that Howard might be omitting details to ensure Rowena's safety from unknown threats. Claude reflects on their missing memories, which make it difficult to determine the absolute truth.
Claude explains the absolute secrecy of the Imperial mark, surprising Rowena with this new information.
Claude reveals he was never told about the mark after assuming his late father's role. Claude deduces he wasn't assigned to protect the mark, leading him to a startling conclusion.
Claude says his sister's name's Stella, causing Rowena to repeat it back in confusion. Claude reasons that if the mark is missing, his sister Stella is likely the one holding it.
Claude finds hope in Stella being alive as Rowena notices a letter on the floor.
Rowena's gaze falls upon a forgotten letter lying near the bottom of the ornate desk.
Rowena picks up the unopened letter, explaining she is paying attention despite Claude's skeptical question.
Rowena identifies the letter as coming from the Royal Academy and expresses her sudden surprise.
Rowena happily realizes that Mary and Victor were accepted into the Academy through her recommendation.
Rowena mentions Victor's invitation while Claude insists they have no time for such social events.
Rowena notes the ceremony is at the Third Royal Academy and will happen very soon.
Claude identifies the Academy's location near the northern border, much to Rowena's surprise.
Claude falls into a deep silence as he contemplates the significance of the Academy's location.
Claude suddenly changes his mind and encourages Rowena to attend the ceremony, surprising her.
Rowena questions the sudden shift in plans, but Claude remains firm about her attendance. Claude explains there is a specific place he wants Rowena to see before the tournament.
Claude plans to join Rowena, using the ceremony as a convenient excuse for their journey.
Claude's gloved hand points to a specific spot on the map spread across the desk.
The map highlights the destination where Claude intends to travel with Rowena very soon.
Rowena is confused about the chosen location, but Claude mumbles that the visit will be brief.
Claude reveals his true plan is to finally visit the remains of the Claude family manor.
The scene transitions as Claude reiterates his intention to visit his former home near the border.
A snowy town and its distant castle mark the arrival at the Claude Manor's location.
Festive banners hang above a quiet, snow-covered street as the pair arrives in the town. A man helps Rowena step down from her carriage as they arrive in the wintry town. Rowena looks around at the snowy surroundings with an expression of quiet curiosity and wonder.
A tall building stands ready to host the enrollment ceremony as the caption confirms the location. Victor explains the small ceremony size is due to the semester already being underway.
Victor notes Mary already moved into the dorms, which saddened his mother significantly.
Victor clarifies Mary enrolled early and won't be attending the current enrollment ceremony.
Rowena observes the ceremony from a balcony, lamenting that Mary didn't get one. Victor stares ahead with a thoughtful and somewhat somber expression during the quiet moment.
Victor slightly turns his head as if noticing something from the corner of his eye. Spotting Rowena and Claude on the balcony, Victor waves up to them with excitement.
Rowena smiles warmly and waves back at Victor from her position on the balcony.
Claude remains in his spectral form, watching the interactions below with a serious expression.
Claude reflects on the lack of nobles, noting that mostly servants and commoners are present.
Claude's presence looms in the background as he senses something unsettling within the Academy.
A firm decision is made to head to their true destination immediately after the ceremony.
A black-shod foot takes a deliberate step forward as the group begins to move.
3 people walk away together while a bell rings out to signal a new session.
Victor thanks Rowena for her recommendation while she asks about Mary's current well-being. Victor reports that Mary is doing well but cannot come to greet Rowena today. Victor passes along Mary's gratitude, which leaves Rowena looking slightly surprised by the message. Victor's smile widens as he prepares to share more information about Mary's busy schedule.
Victor reveals that Mary has a secret meeting today while walking down the stone hallway.
The scene shifts to a vast library filled with rows of books and ornate decor.
Mary stands by a massive bookshelf, reaching up to select a book from the shelf.
Mary pauses and looks over her shoulder, appearing to have heard someone approaching her location.
A silver-haired man greets Mary warmly, and she excitedly identifies him as Mr. Kitty.
The silver-haired man asks if she found the items he requested, which Mary confirms hesitantly.
Mary points to a cart full of books, questioning how he intends to read them. The silver-haired man smiles knowingly as he considers Mary's practical question about the books. He pushes the cart away, stating that reading the books is not actually his intention. Mary questions the necessity of borrowing them when reading in the library would be easier.
He explains that library use is restricted to magic students, which prevents him from opening them.
The silver-haired man reveals he studied here previously and asks how she likes her classes. Reflecting on his youth, the man touches a book as he reminisces about the past.
He claims he once had enough energy to perform magic as a book begins glowing.
Mary is amazed by the stored mana, and he praises her for noticing it so early. Impressed by her intellect, the silver-haired man asks Mary to become his disciple after graduation. Mary laughs at the offer, but prepares to give a blunt assessment of his magical state.
Mary skeptically predicts that he will have no magic left by the time she graduates.
The silver-haired man reacts with a blank stare to Mary's blunt and surprisingly accurate observation.
A close-up shows the man's small, knowing smile as he processes Mary's direct and honest comment. Patting her head, the silver-haired man admits that there is simply no tricking her anymore. He confirms her observation as the book in his hand continues to emit a pink glow.
He explains the books contain results from secret experiments he conducted while studying at the academy.
He describes being scolded by a teacher for trying to store mana within ordinary library books.
The man points out that his seemingly silly experiment has finally found a practical use today.
Mary gazes at him with concern and asks if he is truly feeling okay right now. The silver-haired man begins to explain his perspective while Mary's eyes widen with sudden realization.
He somberly admits that the mana stored in these books will be insufficient for his needs.
He notes it must be visible that the mana is not enough to fill him up completely.
A close-up of his smile reveals a hidden agenda behind his visit to the Academy's library.
Glowing mana ripples through a garden area, suggesting a magical event is beginning to unfold. A dark notification warns that the spell will break as mana pulses around the garden stones. The silver-haired man admits he is running low on mana but believes he has enough to last for a while. He thanks Mary for the books, explaining that he cannot afford to break the spell he is currently maintaining. The silver-haired man notes that he is unable to discuss the details of the spell in their current location.
Purple butterflies appear around the silver-haired man and Mary as they look around at the magical manifestations.
He sweeps his arm toward the snowy landscape as the butterflies flutter over a fence in the distance. A gloved hand reaches toward a glowing purple butterfly fluttering near the snow-dusted buildings of the town. Butterflies fly over the snowy hills and green forests as the man reveals he made a dangerous deal.
The scene shifts to the dark-haired man who observes the landscape with a look of intense focus.
He touches his chest near a jeweled brooch while a dark butterfly flits across his formal attire. Taking a deliberate step onto the grass, he reflects on how long it has been since he saw this place. Looking down with a somber and determined expression, the dark-haired man continues to survey the area. Standing before a grand castle, the dark-haired man confirms his arrival back at the manor of the Claude family. He contemplates the significant amount of time that has passed since he last viewed this estate in person. Entering the manor, he gazes down the long, ornate hallway while light sparkles around his spectral form.
The dark-haired man walks through the corridor, observing the familiar interior of his former family home.
He moves with a quiet intensity as he passes through the silent and well-maintained halls of the manor.
Spotting a hooded figure in the distance, the dark-haired man identifies them as the mage he recognizes.
He recalls being treated for burns by a mage who was recommended to him by a trusted servant.
The dark-haired man reflects on the specific identity of the person who introduced him to that healing mage.
A close-up highlights the intricate lacing on the dark-haired man's uniform as he continues his investigation.
He identifies the culprit as a dark shoe steps firmly onto the patterned floor of the manor hallway.
The dark-haired man watches Baron Sherman and a woman walking together and discussing private matters.
He observes them whispering, noting that Baron Sherman does not appear pleased with the current turn of events. The dark-haired man is startled to overhear them discussing the unsealing of a spell on a coffin.
The woman confirms the discovery, noting the imperial edict was in the possession of the previous Margrave. Baron Sherman urgently silences her to avoid being overheard as the spectral dark-haired man watches from nearby.
A look of anger and frustration crosses the dark-haired man's face as he processes the overheard conversation.
He reflects on the Golden Edict, identifying it as the secret mark of the Imperial family members. A glowing scroll illustrates the requirement for mark-bearer magic to designate the successor to the Imperial throne. Memories surface of Emperor Reuben driving mages out of the palace to remove magic from common life. Flames engulf the manor as he recalls his family's role as the bearers of the Imperial mark. He remembers his father and sister Stella disappearing after the arson that destroyed their family's manor. The dark-haired man narrows his eyes, focusing on the dark implications regarding his father's hidden coffin. Baron Sherman sighs with frustration, stating that they must travel to their destination immediately. He orders the woman to bring the mage for a teleportation spell despite her concern for the patient. A past moment shows the hooded mage treating a younger Claude while the servant's plan is revealed. The true nature of the memory erasing spell is explained, designed to hide Sherman's involvement in the arson. Sherman boasts that Claude will never question him because he posed as the savior during the manor fire.
Sherman mocks Claude for being weak, proving he has a black belt and being a terrible person.
He asks if the coffin is with the previous emperor's remains while the woman explains their Mex MILF.
The woman acknowledges Baron Sherman's instructions with a submissive look as they prepare to depart.
They walk past the spectral form of the dark-haired man, completely unaware of his observant presence.
The dark-haired man realizes that a servant betrayed his family and has been hiding his father's coffin.
He recalls visiting these grounds with Rowena in the past, never suspecting the secrets hidden beneath the manor. Determination hardens the dark-haired man's gaze as he realizes the depth of the betrayal within his home.
He recognizes that his pursuit of the truth poses a significant threat to Rowena's safety.
Looking up at the manor's ornate ceiling, he decides to return to Rowena and share what he discovered.
The scene shifts to the Imperial Palace, where a blonde woman walks alone through a grand hallway.
Gripping her arm in distress, the blonde woman expresses her pain following recent interactions at the palace.
She reveals bruises and marks on her arm, noting that Princess Flora has been punishing her frequently.
Blonde woman reflects on how Princess Flora punishes her for her father's rude meeting remarks. She rationalizes that the princess is simply stressed about the upcoming Imperial hunting tournament.
Determined, she decides the tournament is her family's final opportunity to secure their future.
A black-shod foot takes a deliberate step as she continues moving through the hall.
A dark silhouette appears as she worries the harsh lashings will persist after the tournament. She pauses abruptly with a questioning look, seemingly alerted by an unexpected sound nearby.
Peering around a corner, she spots 3 people walking through the Grand Palace corridor. She identifies a woman in a purple gown and a hooded figure among the group.
Recalling the debutante ball, she recognizes the brown-haired woman as a guide for Elector families.
She suspects the woman serves the Margrave and tries to remember her specific name.
Startled, she overhears the woman mention her past as an Imperial mage and the Golden Edict.
She rushes away, unsure of what she heard, while her black shoe clicks on the floor.
The hooded mage notes that the spell concealing the edict has mysteriously worn off recently.
A man lies within a coffin holding a scroll while they discuss locating a specific mark.
The brown-haired man reports that extensive searches of the Grand Duke's manor yielded no results.
He speculates that the secrets they seek are likely hidden within the walls of Blooming Manor.
Despite increased security, the man decides they have no choice but to investigate the manor.
He orders Morris to transfer the coffin to the Capitol Museum without informing Lady Rachel. The man requests that the mage teleport him back to the manor immediately. Morris confirms she will return to the manor after the coffin has been safely transferred.
The blonde woman gasps in shock after learning the coffin is heading to the museum.
She realizes she has accidentally discovered the whereabouts of the stolen edict sought by the Emperor.
She connects the suspicious group to the Margrave, whom Princess Flora has always deeply mistrusted. She suspects they plan to switch the coffin once it arrives at the Capitol Museum. Walking down the hallway, she considers telling the princess to gain protection for her family.
She hopes that reporting this discovery will make the princess finally appreciate her hard work.
She believes that sharing the truth is the only way her family will receive protection.
Her expression turns somber as she pauses, burdened by the complexity of her family's situation. She laments that her father and brother will likely continue causing trouble regardless of her efforts. A dark shadow highlights scars on an arm as she fears continued punishment for their actions.
She realizes her warnings go unheeded as her father and brother refuse to listen to her.
A close-up focuses on the blonde woman's attire as she grapples with her difficult decision. Standing alone in the ornate corridor, she questions her next move in this dangerous game. She wonders if serving the princess remains her best option while a light source flickers. The scene shifts as she stands in the shadows of the long, empty palace hallway.
The setting changes to a grand brick building standing prominently under a bright afternoon sky. Inside a museum, guests browse various artworks displayed within a spacious, sunlit gallery.
Miss Morris, now in a green gown, examines framed paintings leaning against a storage wall. A close-up shows the polished wood of a large cabinet or door within the museum.
A storage room is revealed, filled with numerous crates, boxes, and miscellaneous supplies on shelves.
Miss Morris apologizes for the delay as she prepares to deposit the items she brought.
Lady Rachel, a blonde woman in white, greets Miss Morris warmly in the museum storage.
Rachel welcomes her back while Morris explains her recent purchase of several artworks at auction.
Morris states her intention to have the pieces evaluated by experts to verify their authenticity. She intends to take the genuine pieces home while Morris watches with a stoic expression.
Morris asks for temporary storage space for the items until the evaluators can arrive.
Rachel agrees and asks Morris to log the expected duration of the item's stay.
A large black coffin sits among the storage crates, secretly containing the stolen Golden Edict.
Rachel internally suspects that the story about the auction is a complete and deliberate fabrication. Rachel watches Miss Morris depart with her entourage, sensing something suspicious about the strange delivery.
Rachel realizes they only need storage for the edict while they hunt for the mark.
She notes that she has the power to move any museum item wherever she pleases.
Rachel reflects on Baron Sherman's bad luck, satisfied that the edict now belongs to her.
A black shoe clacks loudly against the floor as the blonde woman continues her walk.
She weighs her options, feeling uneasy about the prospect of delivering the item to Flora.
Rachel stands alone in the vast museum gallery, surrounded by portraits and empty corridors.
She notes the risks of approaching the Emperor, considering herself aligned with the princess's side.
Narrative notes that despite their public cordiality, the Emperor and Princess seek each other's downfall.
Princess Flora suspects the Emperor ascended the throne through illegitimate means, fueling their covert conflict.
Flashbacks reveal the Emperor avoided his brother's memorial after his tragic accident during his reign.
The Emperor's decision to exile the traditional mages further complicated the imperial family's internal politics.
Rachel suspects the Emperor's search for the edict is driven by a desire to conceal secrets. She decides to inform the princess, but she is suddenly interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Lady Rachel reacts with surprise as an old acquaintance suddenly appears before her in the museum.
Grand Duke Howard Lawrence greets Rachel warmly as he approaches her within the Grand Gallery.
Rachel returns the greeting and politely inquires about the well-being of the Highness, Princess Flora.
Rachel confirms the princess as well and questions the Duke's presence at a museum for commoners. Howard replies he simply does not want to draw any unnecessary attention to himself.
The Grand Duke suggests they relocate to a more private area to continue their conversation.
They sit together on a bench framed by a large painting of a coastal landscape.
Lady Rachel casts a nervous glance toward the Duke as they sit in the gallery. She expresses surprise at his choice of location, having expected somewhere far more secluded.
Howard smiles brightly, noting that he chose the spot because he believed she enjoyed it.
Lady Rachel realizes with a start that the Duke has been secretly observing her movements.
Clenching her dress, Rachel firmly requests that the Grand Duke state the purpose of his visit.
She demands to know why he sought her out, her hand trembling as she grips herself.
Howard calls her a smart lady, suggesting her intelligence is why the princess favors her.
He warns her that the princess is ruthless and known for discarding people without any hesitation.
Duke Howard continues his warning, stating that Flora will cruelly shatter someone without caring at all.
Howard admits his own lack of benevolence, reminding her of his status within the imperial family.
Rachel rubs her arm nervously, feeling the weight of the Duke's intimidating and cryptic words.
The Duke pauses and looks at her intently, his expression shifting to something more serious. Howard promises that anyone who aids him will never find themselves facing his sharp blade.
Lady Rachel stares back at him, clearly shaken by the Duke's sudden and direct offer. He reassures her that he will provide protection and care if she decides to help him.
The Duke asks if she has any information to share, leaving Rachel in heavy silence.
Rachel remains quiet for a moment, her face partially shadowed as she considers her dangerous predicament.
A rustling sound is heard as Rachel reaches into the folds of her pale pink dress.
She pulls out a document and silently hands it over to the seated Grand Duke Howard. Howard questions the contents, and Rachel explains it is a log of items stored in the museum.
Rachel directs his attention to a specific entry she finds highly suspicious regarding recent deliveries.
The Grand Duke studies the document, his expression hardening as he processes the new information.
Walking away, Rachel tells the Duke she will remember the assistance he provided for her.
She stands alone in the corridor, the clicking of her shoes echoing through the empty museum.
The ornate architecture of the museum galleries stands tall, bathed in the soft afternoon light.
Rachel reflects that this information will inevitably lead to a violent bloodbath within the imperial capital.
A close-up shows the delicate bow of Rachel's ribbon as she processes her difficult decision.
Rachel inwardly hopes that her choice today was the correct one for her family's safety.
The red carriage departs from the museum, its wheels rattling over the stone-paved capital streets.
Peering through the carriage curtains, Rachel watches the city pass by with a somber expression.
A musical staff drifts across the scene, signaling a transition in the unfolding imperial drama.
Rowena, blooming, looks at her reflection, realizing her belief in fated love was entirely misplaced.
A street band plays lively music while a curious crowd gathers to watch the performance.
The red-haired singer performs a song about love, music notes floating in the air. Rowena is startled to realize that love had already bloomed in her heart long before.
Enoch Claude appears behind her, asking Rowena if everything is all right during the quiet moment.
Rowena flinches as Enoch reaches for her, asking if she is unwell or needs help.
Looking down with a troubled expression, Rowena struggles with heavy emotions she cannot yet name.
Rowena dismisses his concern, stating she will take a nap because she is slightly tired.
Her expression turns dark and somber as she remains lost in her own grim thoughts.
A man points toward the sky as the narrative mentions a tragic death from long ago.
Labored breathing sounds from the darkness as a mysterious truth begins to emerge, in secret.
A close-up shows the lower face of a man caught in a moment of tension.
The light catches a decorative silver ornament fastened to the sleeve of a dark uniform.
The dark-haired man gasps for air, his expression filled with shock at a sudden revelation.
The narrative reveals a woman ended her life directly in front of her husband, Enoch Claude.
Rowena blooming stands in a garden, recalling how she once believed love was destiny itself.
Falling in love with a complete stranger seemed like a fated sign to her back then.
Looking back at her younger self, Rowena realizes how foolish those romantic notions truly were. Over time, she realized that feelings for another person can be manufactured to look like fate.
Her blue eye reflects deep contemplation as she remembers the artificial nature of her romance. She understands now that emotions can be induced to seem like they were meant to be.
And Claude introduces himself politely, his calm gaze hiding the true nature of his future intentions.
A white-gloved hand is extended, offering a formal invitation within the grand palace halls.
Rowena smiles warmly while asking the black-haired man if he would like to dance together.
Enoch accepts, and they begin to dance while guests watch them under the ornate chandeliers. As they start dancing, Rowena notices the intense stares coming from the rest of the room.
Despite the bad rumors circulating about him, Rowena ignores the whispering noblewomen behind their fans.
She refuses to take the warnings seriously, fully caught up in the magic of the moment. A close-up of Rowena's eye captures her hope that things between them would be different.
She remains convinced that their connection is special despite the warnings from the social circles.
Enoch invites Lady Rowena to a social gathering at Claude Manor in a few days.
Rowena politely declines the invitation, fearing she might be an inconvenience due to her lack of experience.
Enoch reassures her not to worry, his polite words masking the trap he is setting.
He tells her that she only needs to follow his lead during the upcoming social gathering.
Even as more rumors surface after the Emperor's Day, Rowena's trust in Enoch remains unwavering.
She trusts that he will act differently around her compared to his cold public persona.
Dancing together, she believes she sees the same look of love on his face as hers.
To Rowena, it felt like a classic fairy tale encounter of love at first sight.
She believed he felt the same way, cherishing every moment they spent together in the palace.
Clutching a letter, Rowena never doubted his feelings for even a single second of their time.
Unfortunately, Enoch Claude was simply skilled at captivating people, regardless of his own actual feelings.
Rowena reflects that a simple, unrequited romance would have been easier to remember than the truth.
Enoch Claude had a very special role intended for Rowena, far beyond a simple romantic connection.
They made many memories at the opera and art galleries together over the next several years.
The pair walked through the gardens of Blooming Manor, further deepening her misplaced loyal devotion.
Tragedy began to strike everyone around Rowena shortly after she started seeing Enoch Claude regularly. Her friend Howard went missing, and her mother passed away from a mysterious and unknown disease. Her father was executed for high treason, leaving Rowena as the sole survivor of her household.
A hand reaches out to touch Rowena's shoulder, offering comfort that hides a darker purpose.
Enoch Claude testifies that Rowena was entirely innocent of her father Willard Blooming's treasonous actions.
Emperor Reuben pardoned Rowena on Enoch's behalf, knowing they were lovers and he trusted Enoch.
Although pardoned, Rowena's family title and possessions were taken from her by the Emperor.
The Emperor stands over Rowena and Enoch, ordering her to spend life atoning for her family.
Rowena reflects that things were bearable then because she still had someone left after losing everything. She trusted that Enoch, the lover who spared her, would remain at her side for a lifetime.
Rowena hoped that the worst was over and only good things would happen from that moment on.
A text box explains Rowena's regret for once believing in the notion of a happy ending. A heavy wooden door creaks open in the dark, signaling a change in the story's mood.
Faint light casts long shadows across the wooden floorboards as the scene shifts to a bedroom.
Rowena Blooming lies alone on her bed, her solitary posture reflecting her deep grief and abandonment.
Rowena looks at her hand, saddened that Enoch has not come to visit her once again.
After taking the Blooming estate, the Emperor gifted the land to Enoch before their sudden marriage.
Rowena and Enoch marry in a small private garden ceremony due to her family's treason.
Enoch Claude appears serene and handsome at their wedding, hiding his true cold nature from his bride.
A narration box confirms that only the couple and the presiding priest attended their small wedding.
Rowena smiles warmly during the ceremony, fully convinced that Enoch still truly loves her.
Looking at her ring, Rowena realizes that everything in her life changed drastically after the wedding day.
Rowena sits alone on her bed, realizing that Enoch never visits her even when at her residence.
Enoch manages the land's affairs and returns to the capital without ever informing his neglected wife.
Holding a candle, Rowena wonders if Enoch is simply busy as she feels upset by his absence.
Rowena thinks he could have come to see her, her face reflecting her growing sadness and doubt. Rowena spots a light through an open door and approaches it, startled by the unexpected activity inside.
A vassal reports that they are making progress and should locate Enoch's father's coffin very soon.
Rowena stands at the threshold, confirming that Enoch and his vassal are inside having a private meeting. Overhearing them, Rowena complains of a headache while spying on the conversation through the open door. Enoch mentions his worsening burn while the vassal explains that the mage's arrival is currently delayed. The vassal notices Enoch is missing his ring and asks if he misplaced the wedding band. Enoch scoffs, asking why anyone would want to wear a ring tying them to an annoying woman. Enoch mocks the love song lyrics, questioning who could love a woman who sings such things. Enoch clarifies he hates the opera and only attended because he knew Rowena enjoyed going there. Enoch labels Rowena a foolish woman because she cares for nothing except for her misplaced romance. Enoch admits he faked love to steal her estate, leaving Rowena ruined as a penniless fool.
Rowena runs away in tears, finally understanding that Enoch Claude will do anything to get his way.
A narrative box reveals Rowena's growing uncertainty as she tries to understand Enoch's hidden, darker motivations.
From the balcony, Rowena realizes that Enoch's true goal was the destruction of the entire house blooming.
Watching Enoch from above, Rowena finally sees that he has been fooling her since the very beginning.